color.
Yep.
Like
Okay,
usually,
good,
allow.
let's do that.
Okay. That's gotta be it, right?
There you go.
So if I go through Google,
Google.
I can get in.
Which is
Isn't that-
weird because
Because
I
yours
do,
gets in,
and I'm using Safari.
and we got both iPhones. What year is
Yep.
your iPhone?
What's that?
This is a 14. What is your iPhone?
I think it's a 14 as well.
And if you've updated, it should be the same software.
Yeah.
Well, then she's going through Safari. I don't understand. I can get in through.
Okay, let me get the recording going.
Okay, we'll be okay. Well, as we were saying. Jeez Louise. Makes me feel really dated. So I'm on
Actually,
the
just give me a signal once we're recording.
County Health Department. And I can tell you all about mosquito abatement. It's really pretty interesting.
Yeah.
How are you, Doug?
I'm doing well. How about
What's
you?
going on?
I was just complaining. How's that?
Perfect. I
Can't
think you
get things
should.
to work. I had everything up at the house, and then I heard it. So that's good. Okay.
You ready?
Okay.
We would like to welcome you out to the Highland City Council meeting today, Tuesday, May 20th. It is 6:07 p.m. We will begin our meeting with an invocation by myself, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Kim Radella. Our Heavenly Father, as we begin our council meeting tonight, we're indeed thankful for the moisture which we've received over this past couple of weeks to be able to keep things green. We're also thankful for the opportunity we have to be able to serve in this great city. Heavenly Father, we ask that blessing be upon those that might be here in this city, if it be that what they're dealing with, if it be emotional situations or if they're dealing with physical situations, you might be able to watch over them. We also ask that as we deal with one another, we might be able to be kind towards one another and towards the situations we have, our police and fire and those others with our city staff out serving those in the community. Please watch over as they do their transportation and going from. Heavenly Father, we ask you please be with us tonight as we discuss our agenda item, that we might be able to, those who are here to present or those who are discussing, that might be able to be clear and concise, that we might be able to come to good decisions. And this we say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have time set apart right here at the beginning of our meeting for what's called unscheduled public appearances. We'd like to invite anyone here. We do not have any public hearings tonight. So if you would like to address anything on the agenda or anything else, we'd like to invite you to come forward at this time to address the City Council. If you would please state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Isaac Day, and a few months back, me and Abe Day, one of the old members here at City Hall, announced our plan for a Highland Volunteer Action Committee. And tonight, we are glad to announce that we are moving forward with our first project. We are working with local churches, with local charities as well, in order to get everything funded, get everything sustained so that we can keep Highland public spaces looking nice, looking clean, and being a wonderful place to be in while we will work with the city in order to get everything in order, to do everything through the proper channels, and to be able to involve local citizens. And while I'm happy to announce that, there is one small thing that I would like to bring to the attention, and regards possible donation signs. Thank you. So what I've handed out is just a few examples of some signs we are hoping to put around project sites where we will be working, and we will be continuing to work as hopefully the years go by. We will be hoping to set up signs similar to the ones that you see on the paper that I handed out. We will have a QR code link to a donation site for each individual project. So as the people want one area to be focused on more rather than another, we'll be able to pivot our attention towards that. We will be starting out first in the Highland Glen, just because that is the biggest park and it is the jewel of Highland City, as I've heard it called before. So we will be getting there hopefully soon, as I am able to get into contact with local stake and people to sign that up. And we hope to be able to begin on this project here very soon. Thank you for your time.
Just a second, Isaac.
Of course.
I appreciate you coming forward. I remember you and your father coming, that you've been diligent about this. I just want to tell you thank you for that. So I just want to make sure that we understand you've chosen certain areas of cleaning up the trails or things that way. And what you'd like to do is maybe have a QR code where they can maybe donate funds to be able to help clean that up.
Correct. And I don't want to take up too much more time, but we are hoping to put trail signs of similar quality to state and national park kind of quality. We have a person we are looking into right now just to set up in individual areas like parks around the city, so that instead of like going into one big kind of fund for general maintenance around Highland City, it goes to the specific projects. So the money that goes to Highland Glen will stay in Highland Glen.
So as a resident, I'm just trying to think what their concern can be. Okay, here's a donation thing. How do they ensure that it stays there? We do have a council member that sits on the Highland Foundation. Is this something you'd see that?
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't run the funds through the Highland Foundation, because it's a tax-free donation for that.
Right,
And they could annotate, hey, we'd like it for this project. We could make sure the money comes to people.
Is that something
They have Venmo, PayPal.
Yeah, is that something you're envisioning to kind of work with the foundation on some of those?
Right, and we will be working with like local charities. I haven't heard back on which ones we are trying to work on exactly, so we couldn't work with the Highland Foundation, or I'm sorry, what was the name of it again? The
Highland City Foundation.
Yes, that, or in other foundations around Utah, because we don't want to just keep it here in Highland. We want to be able to spread out to other cities to help with their projects as well, but we want to start here with Highland first and foremost.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're just mentioning, okay, I want to focus on Highland Glen Park, and we're going to have a QR code there for them to be able to scan to donate, and that money stays there. That's what I'm saying. It might be beneficial that, one of the things, that's a city park, to be able to have any signage to go up. Just, we want to work with it. It's a great idea, but that would need to be really through the city. We can't just have you go put a sign on down at the city that does that make sense? We need to kind of work together on this.
No, of course, and I totally understand that, and I do not want to take up too much more time. I'm just saying that is something that we are going to try and push for, to work with the city on getting these up, getting these permitted, going through the right channels with all this, so that we can, in fact, do this in the proper manner to keep everything maintained as best as possible.
I think the main goal is we'd like to get the parks cleaned, and I think that's what you're trying to get to.
And that's what we're going to start with first and foremost. Before anything else, we will be working on the parks in order to get them cleaned up. We'll work to get the trails in the best order that we can. And this is just something that I was suggested to bring up tonight in hopes that it could get the gears turning in your guys' head tonight.
I notice you have a missionary tag on. Is this something you're hoping to kind of maybe incorporate into your mission, or is this something separate?
I am a service missionary right now, and they encourage us to go out and look for service opportunities wherever we serve. I am looking for more opportunities here, And whether or not this goes through, and this is just me personally, not speaking for the foundation or anything like that, I personally am hoping to just help out Highland in any way that I can.
And we'll take the help.
Thank you.
So Isaac, we've kind of talked a couple times. Feel free to reach out to me. My information's on the website. If you go onto the city government, underneath highlandutah.gov, and you'll go down to government, you'll get all of our phone numbers. My number's there. Feel free to reach out. I want to make sure our parks department's getting with you, what we can do to kind of help you, because it sounds like a great endeavor to kind of help beautify some of our parks areas. I recognize maybe the ultimate goal might be reaching out, but here in the short term, we do want to work with you.
Of course. And thank you so much for your attention this night, and thank you for the opportunity for me to work with you guys.
Kim, did you?
Wait, Isaac, I got to take your picture and send it to your parents because I just love seeing
You
your
know,
picture.
Kim just lives right down there by you guys. So
I
Thank you,
am
Isaac.
very aware of that. Yes. Thank you
sending
so
that to
much.
your parents.
And have a wonderful night.
hey, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to come up and address the council on any different topic? Mr. Warren.
It's my job. I'm Mr. Warren, Wesley Warren, Highland resident. I don't want to step on Jay's toes too hard. But I was looking at the communication items. And regarding the baseball field, I've been talking to, I don't want to claim to know more than Kim on this topic. I've been talking to a few coaches involved in competitive baseball leagues, and I was not aware that there might be a real opportunity for Highland to sign a kind of like a long-term contract with a league or a team that above and beyond what just field rental charges would be. It would pay for upkeep and maintenance and then some.
So Wes, let me ask you. Okay, Wes is on our Parks Committee. Have you been having some communication with individuals about this?
Not about the opportunity, but
Okay.
just picking brains. Like, hey, there's a new field. What do you guys do? As a league or as a team. One benefit I've heard a couple times that I didn't anticipate or think of really was in an agreement like this, there's a lot of ownership, by the league or the team. And so they want to see that field cleaned and maintained, and they leave it spick and span every time. And then there's, opportunities to have someone that isn't from the city that's part of the team or the league, because with these more competitive leagues, they kind of know what they're doing, running lines on the field, or, some of the basic prep work that we would maybe use city staff for can be written into the agreement, and that saves time and money and ease. So, yeah, I just had done a little bit and saw that on there. And then I also saw, and I don't know what Rob has up his sleeve as far as e-bikes go, but as an e-bike rider, I love them, and I don't want to see them go away. And I ride them on the trails a lot, and I do it safely. So I don't know what the topic's going to be, but I'd like to keep riding mine. So anyway, thanks, Council,
Okay.
Mayor.
Thank you, Wes. Anyone else like to come up and address the council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now close our portion there of the unscheduled public appearances. We'll now move on to our consent items. Item number 2. We actually have 4 consent items. Number 2A is approval of the meeting minutes from April 15th, 2025. Item 2B is approval of the meeting minutes from May 1st, 2025, which was a site tour. We also have item number C is approval or ratification of large purchases. And then item number D is adding a closed session exception to our ordinance, which was about the time and ending of a meeting time. So is any of those consent items need to be pulled?
I'd like to pull 2C.
2C? Any others? Okay, seeing none others, do we have a motion on 2A, B, and D?
I'll make a motion to approve consent items 2A, 2B, and 2D.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Kim, second by Scott. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and go to vote. Is everyone up electronically? I think, Scott, were you able to get in?
I think I'm in.
Okay. So is everyone in on electronic voting? Okay, well, we'll go to the electronic voting screen.
I'm not only in, I beat Kim.
I know, our tech person.
I had to refresh my screen. Come on.
That passes 5-0. We'll now go to item number 2C. Scott, you had some comments?
So I was a little confused about 2C because the resource material just has lots of blanks in it. And then we have a list of all these bigger projects, many of which we've already approved. So I'm not sure what we're approving by the consent item because I don't think we ever changed the amount that we wanted to come before the council. So it seems like we're reapproving things we've already approved. I just didn't understand that part of the...
we've talked about it in a couple of meetings, but basically our purchasing policy currently says anything above $25,000
Right.
needs to be approved by the council. We feel like we've been inconsistent with the application of that when we bring things to council. So we're kind of just covering our bases with these consent items saying, you may have approved these in a contract in the past. They have been approved in the budget. But to cover our bases and make sure we're compliant with our policy, we're going to show you everything that's over $25,000 that we've spent in the last month. So that's what this list is. There may be some things that you did already approve in a contract, but we're just covering our bases. And the intent is not to do this forever, but to do it until we can modify our purchasing policy to be more clear about the things that do and do not need to come to the council.
Well, and I personally think the bigger ones need to come to the council and not just in a consent item. Because when I looked through this, it looked like we'd already discussed most of these. But, big ones, we need to be made aware. And so I just wanted to understand that better. So very good.
Scott, I actually like seeing, even though we might be seeing every month a Lone Peak public safety transfer, it helps us look, hey, these are projects we approved, now we're funding. It kind of maybe helps us know where we're at in the projects, but also if we had a question, like I'll ask when David, I see that we are doing the Safe Route to Schools match. I haven't seen the project start yet. Does that mean we're now close to this project starting, or why are we sending the match if it hasn't started?
Yeah, that's a great question for Chris. Hopefully has an answer.
That's a condition from UDOT. We have to provide the funds before they actually place the project out to bid. It is out to bid right now, and the bid closing is on May 29th, so we should have more details on when that project will start.
Well, I agree. I want to see all of these, but I think they should come individually to us too on some of the big ones.
We just haven't had, if this was what my understanding.
Just a summary.
If this was approved in our budget, then they're now, based off our thing, if they're spending over $25,000, we need to be aware of this, we put as consent. Scott, I don't think on all these prior to that, we were ever seeing any of these.
No, so you have approved these. So complete contracting for the parks maintenance building you approved, right?
We approved most of
Yeah, so the only reason they're on this list and not coming to you individually is because they have already been approved, basically. But it's now we're writing the checks, and so we want to, per our purchasing policy, we're bringing them to you. But if we were, if we were starting the parks maintenance building over again, you would see the bids and make that decision before it ended up on this list.
That's what I wanted to understand,
Yes.
because I was hoping that we weren't just approving it through the consent agenda.
That's not the intention.
Okay, okay, very good.
Yeah, in our earlier discussions, we had given a couple of options. We could provide the entire check register every month if the council wants to see that much detail. But with discussions with the council, it felt appropriate right now to just send the summary of larger items that we're writing checks for so that you're aware of them. And I will mention, I think Doug was maybe about to make a comment, but there is a correction to what was in the packet. One of the items for our sewer treatment user fees said February when it should have said March. So I just want to make that correction to the exhibit.
Is there any other discussion on that item? If there's not, we need to now have a motion on item number 2C.
I move to ratify the large purchases under item 2C on the agenda.
I'll second it.
A motion by Doug, second by Scott. Do we have another screen here to vote on?
I don't think we have the ability to do a second
Okay,
one
we'll
on the
start down
same
here.
item.
Brittany,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Kim.
Yes.
and Ron.
Yes.
That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to our first action item, which is action item number 3A. This is about maintenance agreements. The city has looked at, I think has come into the city prior, that has not ever received any up or down motion on that. So Jay, if you'd like to walk us through that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good to be here with you tonight. Yeah, we have 3 applications before you tonight. These were found while we were cleaning up some old files and yeah, just going through the enforcement process. Rob did inform me that these maintenance agreements need to be approved by council, so we're just making sure we're square where we need to be. You'll notice that some of the applications had, they were completed in different amounts, and Doug brought that up, and I wanted to share with you that going forward, we have a spreadsheet that tracks and documents all encroachment cases now. I started those about a year ago, and also it tracks approved maintenance agreements so that we'll know when they need to be renewed, because per the resolution that enacted maintenance agreements, they do need to be renewed every 5 years. And those can be done by staff, but we will bring those to council when we feel like there's maybe extenuating circumstances or some intricacy that we would like the council to weigh in on. If it's just basically, it's the same as it was when you approved it the first time, I don't feel like we need to, waste time doing that, but we're certainly willing to do whatever the council would like. So before you tonight are 3 applications for review. We will be going over them one by one and approving them with their own motion individually, so that you can weigh them each 1, 2, and 3. So that we have Josh Otteson, Scott and Summer Dunn, and then David and Lori McKay. And so the main basis for encroachment enforcement is Resolution R2022-27. Most of the text in the staff report regarding the justification for encroachment enforcement and the procedures we follow are taken directly from that tonight. And we'll talk more about this in the work session regarding encroachment as well. So for tonight's process, I'll be sharing with you an aerial view of the property with boundary lines showing the city's property lines versus the private property. The applicant's narrative justifying their request for an encroachment exception through the maintenance agreement, and then pictures showing the nature of the encroachment and other considerations for your decision. So first is the Otteson application. Here you can see the Otteson, and I really hope I'm saying their last name right, is outlined in red. City property is shaded in light blue. And then this shows where exactly in red the city believes the encroachment is taking place. The nature of that is some sod, a shed, and some curbing. And I included their justification as they wrote it in their application in the staff report. Hopefully you read that. I've highlighted in boldface and underline what I believe are the pertinent part that really speaks to why this should or should not be approved. And it says potential for fire risk from the hill improved the look and feel of the slope and provides safe passage for our local elementary school age kids. So once again, going back to this, we have a shed and some other items that are there on city property. In this picture here, you'll see the yellow lines show where the end of the Otteson property is, and then the red shows where they've encroached onto city property. So the shed is there, and then the line where you can see some thistles, that is the uphill side that goes up, it leads up to 10,400. And so basically what, if I understand their narrative, and I'll try and draw here, is children would be walking through, it's not showing up really. Okay, I guess it is. They'd be walking through here, up their driveway through here, and then up this pathway to get up to 10,400. And here's another one. They talked about fire reduction danger. With the exception of some paths, there has been no alteration or improvement of the hillside from its wild state that I could see when I went out there and took these pictures. For 10-400 access, the red line is the pathway that would be taken according to the narrative provided. But where that brings you up is to an unfinished portion. There's no sidewalk, no shoulder. Staff does not believe that this would be a very safe place for them to go, for children to be directed. If we go back to here, that blue line on the east side of the property would take you up to the sidewalk. That would be more beneficial, but if we're talking about that, there actually is no encroachment in that area. Is everybody following me?
No, okay, your blue line, you're saying there's been no encroachment, it's only the red line?
Yeah, there is no encroachment there. You can see the edge of their property is this yellow line right here. So children could walk up this way through their property if they're willing, and then they would take a pathway that I found here, and the sidewalk goes over here. According to the narrative, if I understand it, they would be walking up here under this tree, past the shed, and up here, and then they would come out here onto 10-400. And as I pointed out with this picture, it is not a very safe place for us to be putting children out to. And so considering that, and also considering that the shed itself is called out in the maintenance agreement resolution as a prohibited improvement on city property, staff actually recommends not approving this application.
Now, and I think, just can I ask a question here, Jay, is the one reason, because I think there'd been an inquiry about maybe purchasing this property, but one of the reasons I think it's in the narrative is the staff says this could be part of a drainage area here.
Yes, this is a drainage area, not only drainage for water in the area, but the staff, Public Works staff said that there is underground sewer and water infrastructure that the city needs to protect. So this parcel or any of the land within it that the city owns would not be up for purchase.
So, Jay, can you bring that map up and draw in where those easements are for the sewer and the...
They run... It's on my desk. Jeff Murdoch printed out a hard copy now that I remember it. He printed out a hard copy and it's on my desk. I could show you where those improvements are, but yes, when we talked to them about the possibility of selling this land, Public Works was a little, they asked why would we want to sell this? We actually have infrastructure in the area, and I said, okay, that's good to know. We'll back off of that idea then.
But currently, there's no infrastructure under the shed itself that we know of?
I don't believe so.
So I had a question. Unfortunately, I downloaded the agenda on my computer, I had everything going, and then I hit some button and my computer wiped out. So I've got to call my IT kids to fix this. But
your IT support.
When I looked at the packet, it appeared that there was a maintenance agreement signed in December 2023
yes.
for these people, because the next two ones didn't have signed agreements.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Was that an application only?
It is an application. They have to be ratified by council, which is what we're doing tonight. And going in, and Doug had a question about this. Going forward, the process that I would like to have happen is city staff receives the application, and we receive payment as specified in R202-27 of $25 for processing. Then we bring it to council. Council considers it, and thank you. And council would consider it, and then depending on their decision, if it's approved, then we would execute and notarize it, as you saw that one in the packet. That one that it looks fully executed, that was received, I believe, by Kelly, and I would just like to change the process so that we don't have an expectation by the applicant that because they've signed it and it's been fully executed, that they actually have a ratified agreement.
So
Because
they went through all the steps, but it wasn't ratified by the council.
correct.
That's what you're telling me.
So
Yeah,
has
so that's what we're
did-
doing
did-
tonight.
I don't see anything in here where there's no signature by the city side. It's only on the applicant side. Am I thinking
Right.
correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a complete contract. Yeah.
All right. So according, Scott, also to your other question,
Right.
is according to this drawing that I have from Public Works, our infrastructure right now runs right here.
So why is that? Why does the shed impair that?
It doesn't, but the drainage in the area, when the subdivision was built and developed, they did have to go through. There's a French drain in the area and some other improvements down here on the, this direction on the street that that they've found for drainage that comes down off of this slope, and they just want to protect that. And they fear that if we were to sell it and it was further improved by the new owner, that it would impede drainage issues in the area.
So where does the drainage go? It looks to me like it drains into their yard. I'm just a little confused about where the drainage is that you're trying to preserve. Because, I mean, the slope looks like it all drains down into their yard from the street. Is there another drainage channel? I was just curious.
Or is there a holding area here?
Yeah.
Chris, did Jeff update you at all?
No, I didn't talk to him about it, and I'm not aware. That's my guess, is there's probably some sump or basin that it drains into, but I'm really not familiar with this area, to be honest with you.
Yeah, do you think we could maybe investigate this a little more and bring it back? Because, I mean, we're kind of making some assumptions in that. We don't want to do it because we got to protect the drainage, but I'm trying to figure out where that drainage is.
Maybe
And,
we could.
I'd just like to understand it better before I vote one way or the other.
And given that it's been so long between when they submitted it and when we're considering it, I'd also like to push this one out to the next meeting to reach out to the residents and make sure that they understand we're dealing with it and have a chance to be here if they'd like.
I did notify them that we would be considering it tonight. I only heard back from the Dunns, and they said they couldn't be here. So.
Well,
I
don't-
think we should deny this one because it doesn't meet the requirements of the maintenance agreement. But if this is something where they want to keep the shed, then we just need to relook at the reasons why we didn't sell this property. But I mean, according to our stipulations for maintenance agreements, we can't approve this.
That's true, but
I
I'd
agree
like
with
to
Kim.
understand because I'm being told I can't approve it because of drainage and utilities and everything. I'd just like to know where they're at. Yes, it's true they built a shed and shouldn't, but they may have built that shed before we redid all of our ordinances too. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
what is saying, let's assume they did. I think we have to be careful that even if we enter into maintenance agreement, we don't allow structures in our, as according to our maintenance agreement. But I think what you're asking, Scott, is this an area where we would then consider selling it, and that would be a
Right.
different
It
discussion.
seems to me like you could sell that little piece, but if it does impair drainage and things, I'd like to know why we'd like to keep it.
And then I'd always go, we've got to, for me personally, I think we always have to be careful. Are we willing to, we've had encroachers, and if we start selling pieces always because they encroached, then we'll keep getting encroachers. But at the same time, I've heard this one area, this isn't going to be the only property owner. Me and Jay went and knocked on the door of another encroacher in this area, which backs up to here, and they were both were inquiring. So it's going to be this neighbor. We knocked on this neighbor's door, as well as another neighboring neighbor, and they both have said, hey, is this something the city needs to keep? What you're asking, Scott, is we keep hearing from staff, we believe there's some drainage in this area, and you're just asking where's that drainage?
Yeah, I'd just like to understand. So if we're saying, we're going to reject this just because there's a shed there and they shouldn't have built it, and I understand that. And I mean, you can make an argument like Kim did to reject it, but at the same time, we're using other things like drainage and utilities. It'd be nice as a council to know where they are.
So I guess coming back to Kim's question, if the council, if we're looking as a maintenance agreement, this does not currently meet any criteria of our maintenance agreement. The next discussion might be, want to have this come back as a discussion to surplus this property, that we don't see the city needs to keep that. In order to do that, we need that information Scott's asking.
Right, because do we really need that little piece of property there?
And that's what staff is
It seems
stating,
like an
yes.
odd-shaped lot to me, but whatever.
So I agree with Kim about the maintenance agreement, that we have a list of rules and restrictions that are on there. And I think that we need to pay attention to those and remember there was a long process we went through to put those restrictions there. So if we wanted to reconsider selling the property or understanding that better, I guess that's fine, but I would be in favor of denying the maintenance agreement because it does not meet the requirements of our maintenance agreement.
I agree with that as well. There's three of us here.
Well, no, you can take a motion. We were just in discussion. If there's other discussion, and then we can have either a motion to continue, a motion to deny, a motion to.
I think the idea that we sell it is a separate idea from the maintenance agreement. The maintenance agreement needs to be denied.
It sounds like we just need a motion to that effect.
That's right. I move that we deny, what's the wording here?
So just as you do, Scott, because the other property owner, we had talked about maybe bringing that specific parcel in to maybe consider surplusing it. So that might be something as another future discussion. Does that make sense? And I'll share with you why we haven't brought it in, a little bit later.
Well, I mean, we can always be hard-nosed.
So, okay, anyway.
I move that the city council deny the open space maintenance agreement with Joshua Otteson due to the following. One, the shed structure on public property is not consistent with the guidelines in section 9 permitted and prohibited improvements of an MA, a maintenance agreement, and the improvements are not for the benefit of the public.
I'll second.
A motion by Ron, second by Kim. Further discussion?
And I don't disagree with the points with regard to the shed being contrary to our maintenance agreement policy. I will be voting no on this simply because I would really prefer to. It has been so long in between the application and us considering it that I would really like to have the opportunity to go knock on their door and make sure that they know that it's coming to the council, so that they have an opportunity to speak to it.
I understand that. I just don't know what we're going to learn that'll do anything to say that this maintenance agreement's okay. It's not okay, but selling the property is a separate issue.
Can you remind me again, because my computer went down, when we passed the new things on the maintenance agreement?
It was July of 2022.
Okay.
We have a motion in front of us to deny this application. So that is what we are voting on. This passes 3-2. Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
All right, this application is for Scott Dunn. He is located here along the trail, Murdoch Canal Trail. Sorry, just getting my brains about me. You can see here the highlighted section in red is where the encroachment is. Their justification, bold-faced here, the specific city property was a dumping ground for grass, branches, rocks, and concrete and other debris. When we landscaped our property, we cleaned up and landscaped the city open space. The improvements beautified the space, which has been appreciated by us and users of the Murdoch Trail. The nature of the encroachment is sod, curbing, and trees. Staff has not found that it blocks access to the property, doesn't block access to the trail, and is consistent with other allowances the city has made with maintenance agreements to allow improvements of this nature along its trailways.
I thought that the Dunns did a really nice job landscaping this, and that, yeah, it doesn't cause any problems with public use, but it really does beautify that section of the trail.
Wait, are you allowed to have curbing according to the maintenance agreement or no?
Wasn't
No.
a certain height? I thought they could, Rob, that would be a question you could, we have the agreement there. That's a good question.
Curbing is on the not allowed list.
That's what I thought.
So to be consistent, we could say no. Curbing is just used as a separator between grass and improvements. You can see there's a little bit here. So
Wait, so where is their property line on this? Okay, right up to their
might be a little
driveway is the
bit
property
easier to
line.
see.
I think one of the reasons we didn't want curbing is it shows ownership.
Yeah.
It makes sense. They're trying to show that they own the city property. But it's also up to the council if that, like you said, it has beautification here.
But
Jay,
this
we-
is a classic case of where people have beautified along a trail. So what's your option, to have a bunch of weeds there between their driveway and the trail?
No, I'm not, I'm just saying.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you, I don't understand why, what the big deal is about a little bit of curbing there. I mean, that's easily taken out.
So let me, so help us, so we have the curbing, there's also large trees here, and they plant large trees in that area. I remember that being a discussion point too. Rob, do you remember if they can plant trees?
We do say they can, as long as they don't create a barrier.
I'm sorry.
Well, I also just wanted to apologize to the council for my tardiness and lack of dress. I've been at the
didn't even
hospital with my
notice.
father. So
He's had some things going on today personally.
we also may not own a portion of the property where the gravel is. So the curbing may actually be on their actual property line.
Is this
This is part of the Canterbury Trail.
Is this technically curbing? When I look up the definition of curb online, it's a stone or concrete edging to a street or path. I don't know what from a state and city.
I've been charged for this thing. They
The
call
council can
curbing.
decide how they want to apply the curbing restriction.
Okay,
How
now that-
broadly or narrowly to
Does
define it.
everyone understand what Rob's talking about? Along this trail here, we've had the Provo River water users, and we sold some of the property down further to the east. And what he's saying, this property might be based off of that title work. It might not be owned by the city. It could be Provo River.
The entire portion of that property?
No, probably just the portion that's gravel. It's about 7 to 8 feet in. roughly.
Including the curbing?
It might be the curbing as well.
So I'm fine doing the maintenance agreement
'Cause
as
the
long
cur-
as that curbing is over on the Provo River. So then we can, because I mean, we spend a lot of time, with
agree,
maintenance
working this.
agreements, encroachments. So I just want to stick with what we came up with. And once you start making exceptions, then it just is a trickle down effect.
I agree.
Go to that picture. I didn't notice this before. Is there a fence there?
No, there's not.
That chain link.
Oh,
thing?
along the.
Right. Is that next to the trail or?
I
Sorry,
don't
this
remember.
fence
Yeah,
right here.
I see it. I don't remember it when I went out looking. Oh, I think that is actually a. Well, no.
So it's not next to their rocks. It's okay. The other side of the trail. I couldn't tell from the angle of the photo. Okay.
The Provo River, along a lot of these properties that back up to this trail, I know Provo River had been working with them on any fencing back in that area. Where we talk about our maintenance agreement, Provo River is on the opposite end if there's been encroachers, making sure they're getting off also. We're not the only ones that deal with encroachment. So coming back, so Rob, how sure are you there might be some ownership of Provo River along this area?
I'm very sure that there is ownership by Provo River along here. Where that exact line is, I'd have to find the record of survey they had prepared. But I'm willing to bet it's about there, honestly. That looks to be about the right distance in. But if you want to make a motion, either to keep the curbing or to move it, make sure the curbing's not on city property. We can work with them on that, I think.
Wait, so why wasn't this property included with all those other properties that backed up to it to be sold?
They might not have approached us.
I think it might have been offered for sale. About half of them didn't accept.
So I thought if they didn't accept, we wouldn't do a maintenance agreement with them.
We could still do a maintenance agreement for the open space the city does own. It's just a smaller parcel than what the county parcel map shows. It's just up to the council what you want to do.
So again, we're making decisions and we don't quite know for sure.
Well,
If
we
the
don't know
city
exactly
owns
where
it
the
or
boundary
Provo
line
River
is,
Waters,
just because we
use-
haven't readjusted
own it.
those boundary lines through there yet.
Uh-huh.
But we do know they have done the landscaping. I don't know exactly where the line is, though. I couldn't draw it.
And
You
they're
are right.
applying
You are
for a
correct.
maintenance agreement. So if we don't allow this, then they have to come in and tear out the trees and the gravel and just let it go to weeds? Is that what we're saying?
Depending on who owns that property, yes.
I'm sorry, council. I was thinking that this one we were clear on where it was. I'm wondering if this one would be better brought back ultimately when we know exactly where those property lines are.
I just also want to clarify, because I do remember when we sold property along that section that we basically said you have to buy the property or vacate it. You can't have a maintenance agreement, because essentially it was saying, well, you can have it for free with a maintenance agreement if you don't want it. Do you remember what I'm saying here?
Yeah,
Because-
that sounds like the conversation to me.
Well, I think we ought to look at the minutes because I don't remember that at all. And
So I would be good
so
bringing this
you were
back.
you were forced to buy the property that we didn't own. So it's kind of a conundrum, I think.
I move to continue the Dunn application.
I
I'll
second it.
second it.
Hey, I have Doug, and I think it was Ron that then seconded. So it'd be Doug and then Ron seconded the motion to continue. Is there further discussion on this one? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote on the continuance. The continuance was passed 5-0. We'll now move on to the next property.
All right, the application from the McKays. This is the highlighted in light blue. That L shape is the city-owned property in question. Not all of it, but that's where how it shows up on the Utah County parcel maps. The small strip highlighted in red is the encroached section in question for the maintenance application. In their justification, they cite that it's landscaped to increase the beauty of the city trail. The owners of the adjacent property will provide sufficient watering and irrigation to maintain the 5 trees. Grasses growing along the strip will be trimmed to be less than 6 inches tall at all times. Once again, this is another case where the city has approved similar maintenance agreements along the trail. Maintenance agreements like these help city staff not to have to go out and maintain. If it's not maintained, these are areas because they're highly trafficked by residents for walking, riding, and everything. We do get a lot of complaints about weeds, so it does help to have residents voluntarily taking these sections and maintaining them themselves. I'm open for any questions or comments on this.
So I know we were working on a trail maintenance plan. I mean, this trail looks like it needs to be maintained. Do we know where it is on the maintenance? Are we still constructing that plan? Because obviously it looks like you need to do some crack seal or something here.
Yeah, I can look and see if it's on our list of projects that we're putting out right now. I don't know if it is, but if it's not, maybe we want to add it.
My only question would be about the trees. I know that in my neighborhood, there are a lot of problems with the trees that the roots are growing up and kind of displacing the trails. So that's my only concern with the trees. Are any of these trees those kind of trees that cause a problem? I'm not an arborist.
I think that's a really good question. I'm saying, hey, we're going to do a maintenance, but we got to make sure you don't put a tree in that will cause us maintenance. like you said, this trail issue in the future.
Exactly.
In the maintenance agreement, do we have, if they put a tree in, do we have to approve the type of tree that it is?
We have a, yeah. But
I
these
think it
are
would be
existing
good.
trees.
This is what
And this isn't a concern saying that it changes my vote. My vote is positive on this, but it just seems, if we have 10 houses along this area and 3 of them have maintenance agreements and 7 of them don't, how does Parks know what area they do? And it just seems like it's going to create a complicated process for our Parks Department. Although if they keep it up, then they're going to see that it's mowed and they just mow the areas that aren't mowed. I can see how that can work, but it just seems problematic, but not enough that I don't like what we're doing here. I do like what we're doing.
To your question, Brittany, Josh Castleberry said he doesn't think. He said the damage to the trail was not caused by the spruce tree, as it is right now. However, long term, it could cause problems. He said he believes the damage may have been caused by another tree or possibly some roots that weren't properly removed when the trail was built.
And there is some damage to the trees adjacent to those spruce trees from suckers coming up through the trail. But Josh didn't think that it was related to the spruce. That's not quite the same question as roots uplifting the trail, but
I think that having council approval and maybe having, of what kind of trees are okay to put in areas like this, when you have a very narrow strip of land and you put, pine trees that get very wide at the base, then they start growing out into, those bottom branches start growing out into the trail. So having some oversight on what can be located where, I think would be very good to have going forward.
I thought we did have a list of approved trees that could be planted along a trail.
Not specifically a trail, but we do have park strip approved trees, which would be very similar.
Okay.
So we could pull on that list.
Okay.
I love spruce trees. They're actually my favorite, but they're not appropriate for this trail. Over time, they have the most shallow roots of any tree system, and they will come in and impede that. It may not have happened yet, but I guarantee in the next 5 or 6 years, those roots will be lifting that pavement up. So I think spruce trees along this area is a problem.
So this is a thing where I think we should have a general rule that we think our trees that are in these maintenance agreements shouldn't interfere with our trails or cause problems. But I also wouldn't feel like I would feel comfortable wanting to approve every tree that anybody plants. I would trust Josh or staff or whoever to say these trees we feel like are fine or these we feel like are a problem, and then go from there.
Love it.
Is it something, do you want us to tell, if obviously these are already planted, do you want us to tell them they have to pull it out? Or do you want us to say any of them moving forward, it has to be this list of trees?
Just leave it up to Josh.
Yep.
I think if we're starting to notice any trees are causing problems in the trails, they need to come out. But if it's not at this time, I think we're okay. But like I said, I think that would be up to Josh. Josh can determine, hey, yeah, this is an area where these trees, and I think, it would be wise.
I can agree with that. I think if they're not causing a problem, leave them in. If they are, then they should take them out.
Yeah. So.
I'm fine approving this one just because it seems to go along with our maintenance agreement.
So is there a motion?
I move the city council authorize staff to execute an open space maintenance agreement with David and Larry McKay, subject to the following stipulation. All improvements shall be consistent with the proposed maintenance plan submitted with the application.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kim, second by Scott.
I would like to add 2 stipulations. And the first is that the trees be trimmed so that they're not impinging on the trail up to 8 feet. And the second, that if the trees begin damaging the trail, that the trees come out. And I'm okay making a motion to amend, or we can just
Can we would you like to
agree to
incorporate
accept
that-
it.
would you like to incorporate that in your motion.
Yeah. So you just said trim the tree branches up to 8 feet from the edge of the trail?
No,
Okay.
so that they are not impinging on the trail
Oh, 8 feet
up to
height.
8 feet in height.
And then also, if there's anything, then they have to be removed. It would cause issues for the trail.
Yeah, I'm fine
Why
with
would
that.
you go up to 8 feet?
Yeah.
I haven't found anybody 8 foot tall yet. Why not
We could do
6
7
and a
feet.
half? 7 feet.
I don't know. Just maintain them according to how Josh wants them to. I don't want to dictate how trees are trimmed.
Okay, we have a motion. Doug is talking about, do we need to have an alternate motion, amended that motion, or would you like to incorporate this in your motion? Kim and, it was Kim and Scott.
I mean, I'll incorporate it, but I just don't want to dictate. I just don't feel like as council,
We can pull off the
Okay.
height limit.
Okay.
So Stephanie, if it's incorporated, Scott, are you okay having it incorporated on this motion?
Can we restate what's
Yeah, that's what-
incorporated?
So can you restate what we have?
Yes, so we are going to authorize staff to execute an open space maintenance agreement with David and Laurie McKay. Subject to the following stipulation, all improvements shall be consistent with the proposed maintenance plans submitted with the application. The trees shall be trimmed so not impinging upon the trail, period?
Yes.
Okay. And then trees, if the trees begin damaging the trail, they will need to be removed.
I'll second that if you agree to
Okay, so
that,
that's-
Kim.
Okay,
Okay.
so we have our motion. You've heard what was said, so we're ready to go to vote. Okay, that passes 5-0. We're now moving on to our next. These are now just discussion items that we're going to be entering into. We have discussion items. Our first one will be discussion item 4A, which is a daycare development. We're going to have Rob Patterson walk us through that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and welcome back to the PO zone, but hopefully for a positive reason. This is, as you recall, I'm in the process of doing the amendment. State law changes necessitated some time, but we're still moving forward with that. One of the problem sites I have with the PO zone is this professional office B site, highlighted in blue, where it has 2 buildings set up there. We heard from residents when we were talking about the amendment before, they weren't super thrilled with those buildings or their height or their location. There's some question whether there should be 2 or 1 building, given the flex office buildings that are on the opposite side. While I was trying to figure that out, I was approached by a potential developer. We have a representative here tonight. Who wants to put a daycare center. Doesn't quite fit what they have here, but potentially could be something that would be workable. And so the conversation tonight is the council interested in moving forward with this concept? If so, we'll put it together and, put in terms and get an agreement together. If you're not, then we'll end it here and just work on the PO zone amendments holistically. So I highlighted all of those issues. Essentially, they're asking for a legislative development agreement. Legislative meaning we actually follow the code amendment process for it, which allows us to override code. We're essentially putting by agreement, a zone on top of just this site that'll override the existing zoning. So we don't necessarily have to follow those building design styles, the site plan. These are useful concepts when you want to do something for a specific site without worrying how much it affects everything else around it. If you really like a concept from a developer, but you're not sure if you like that anywhere else, you say, okay, we can do it by agreement, record it with this property, and move forward. From a staff point of view, given the trickiness I have with this site, this actually might help resolve some of the issues with the PO zone. Again, assuming that the council, though, is on board. So just to highlight what we have, so the current plan for this has 6,800 square feet of building footprints between the 2 buildings, 18,000 square feet of buildings if you count all 3 stories for the buildings together. We have a building 4, which is a 2-story or 3-story building if you count the basement, and again with building 6. And this is just that a little bit closer. You see building 6 up there on the north, building 4 on the east. These are the current concept, the plans that were approved for the PO zone. So that's building 4 and building 6. The proposal is in one sense, smaller. It covers more footprint, but it's only a 1-story building for a daycare facility rather than a 2-story building as is currently planned. I asked some questions. They're planning on this being a larger facility, about 10,200 square feet or so. A little over 100 children will be planned to be part of this facility. Again, peak traffic would coincide with, your standard pickup and drop off times for people going to work. And here is their concept. So you'll see, and actually I'm just going to go to the next one. I overlaid the two sites on top of each other. So you see the old building 6 and 4. The new proposed building is more on the south side and kind of more perpendicular to the residential buildings, meaning ideally there's going to be less of a visual impact to many of them. And these were the elevations that were in the packet. We actually got updated ones just a few hours ago. So this is what you saw. This is kind of their concept with pitch roofs, columns, that residential flavor. This is their updated concept that better fits with the footprint they're showing. Looking at this, it seems to align pretty closely both with what the PO zone currently requires and the kind of architectural guidelines I was looking to put into the PO zone moving forward. I think it'd be very easy to square these two things together moving forward. So there's the few more elevations. And again, we have representative from the potential client if you want to speak with him about any kind of development, how this will look. Just in terms of options, we're looking for direction. You can wait for me to complete the PO zone amendments. The only concern is anytime we talk about the PO zone, it kind of becomes a big issue for good reason, but that might take some time to work through between commission and the council and working with the residents. The client wants to move fairly quickly on this. So they don't want to wait for the whole zone to get updated. They want to get this site fixed.
I would like to ask some questions of the client, if you were willing to
Sure.
come forward.
Is there other questions of Rob before, I'd be amenable to having the client come up also. Now, this is not an application. This is just
Tell us whether it's worth both them and us spending time on this. And if it's not, great, we'll just continue as we've been directed.
Okay. If that client's here, we'll.
Have you operated other 112 children facilities before?
I have 5 children, and sometimes it feels like 112.
Okay.
No, would be the developer. We would build and own and then lease this to the daycare. We currently have 2 daycares up and running in the Wasatch Front and about 4 others under construction.
And how many?
Logan, could you,
children
I'm
involved?
sorry to interrupt, could you just give us your name for the record?
Yeah.
Who you represent?
You bet. Tom Cruise. Just kidding. Logan Johnson with the Wright Development Group out of Centerville, Utah. Sorry about that. Thanks, Doug. So we are not the operators. The tenant is a national daycare operator in this particular site. It's called the Learning Experience, and they operate thousands of stores across the United States. So we would build the building and then do a build-to-suit lease with the tenant, and it's usually a 15 to 20-year lease, and they would operate. It's a great operator. They have a lot of success. They're just making their first forays into Utah. So.
My questions have to do, and that's why I asked if you had the experience in it, because my concern is going to be the parking and the traffic that's created and the flow of that traffic. It's not like a school where that flow is critically important. We have a school up in Alpine that is a nightmare for traffic. We don't want to replicate that. But this is where you have to get out of the car, you're going to have to park, go inside, sign your child in. I don't know what the average is, 1.2 children per car, or is it 1.5? Is it just 1? Because that's potentially 112 cars.
Yeah.
So how many parking lots are in here, and have you taken into consideration the volume of that 2-hour window of that many cars coming in?
Yes.
Over 100 probably.
Yeah. Yes, we have. So I believe there's 40 stalls on this concept. We haven't fully engineered it, so when we get our setbacks just right, maybe we gain a couple of stalls or lose a couple of stalls. Before we brought this site to you, we took it to the operators, the tenant, TLE, and they advised us on how they would want the flow to work in there and how drop-off works. So you'll notice there's a little bit of a loop. A car would drive in and head towards the north, and then they would come down and drop off at the front. Typically, they have staff that is out front, and the kids can just come in without the parent having to get out of the car in this particular model. And that's how they anticipate running this store.
So you're saying staff would be out in the parking lot?
Yeah, the idea is the cars would just loop around, and then the kids would get out of the car, and the staff would welcome them, and they would only need to the adult would only need to get out of the car if they felt like they needed to come in.
So they don't necessarily need to park.
For the pickup and drop off, that's exactly right.
Then that comes back to my concern about the schools, because that's what they have, is they have kids dropped off.
Yeah.
And it's a massive traffic problem.
What's been their experience? Like when we look at a school, they start at, let's say, 9 a.m.
Yes.
Everyone's trying to, is this what you will experience in this, or is it a certain time that everyone gets there, or how's that?
No. So unlike a school, which has a bell that rings at a certain time and you're rushing to get your kids right before the bell and everyone's coming at the same time, the demand for drop-off ebbs and flows with people's schedules. So if I got to be to work at 8, but my neighbor's got to be to work at 9, we do see that the peak happens during that 2-hour window, but it's unlike a public school where it has a start and stop. This is, you drop off, they're catering to the parent. You drop off a kid when you're ready. So I'm not promising there's not going to be a moment or two when there's a little bit of traffic looping in there. But the way that it's designed, I don't foresee a repeat of the problem you described at the public school.
So a question I have, this is owned by a builder themselves, Patterson Construction.
Yeah.
I take it you've already negotiated with them on being able to buy this if it's a favorable outcome, correct?
We are currently under contract. That's right. I don't know that it's contingent on a council decision. It's just on us to gauge that risk. But
So Rob, as we come back to parking, we understand this could be a daycare, but let's assume they're not successful. As we look at this building, as it gets converted into an office, let's say an office use, what would be our parking requirements if it was an office use?
Typically 4 per 1,000. So this would be, if it's at 40, it would still meet the parking requirement. We have a 5 per 1,000 parking requirement for typically retail, where you have more intense uses, versus office, which is usually a little bit less. And we can double check that and make sure that their parking is sufficient for the professional office zone, which are offices, and say you have to at least meet that parking requirement.
So Counselor, Scott, you can ask, is this a use we would be amenable to in a PO zone, a professional office
Well,
environment?
also to clarify, daycares are
Permitted?
a conditional use of the PO zone. So a daycare is allowed, but we don't really have a building in the PO zone that is this size, and this site specifically is kind of 2 buildings and may or may not work. So they can't build this building, but they could do a daycare.
So let me understand. So in this area, we're going from 2 buildings to 1, and the 1 building actually is less than the 2 buildings square foot, right?
Overall, yes.
And so there's less building in there, and it's only 1 story, which has always been the controversy with the neighbors. They don't like the 2-story issue. So it's 1 story, and there's less square footage of actual office daycare space.
Correct.
Although the footprint is larger than the other 2 combined.
Yeah, the footprint's a little bit bigger, but its massing will be smaller. The height is being looked at around 25 to 28 feet is what their elevations are showing. Obviously not finalized yet, but in that range, rather than 35.
Okay, so what you have up here on the map right here, building 4 and building 6, what was the square footage? I know you mentioned this. What was the square footage proposed there?
3,400 is the footprint.
Okay.
But each building could have a 3,400 square foot main floor, a 3,000 square foot basement, and a 3,000 square foot second floor. So each building could have almost 10,000 square feet in and of itself. This is saying we just want to remove all of that and put it into 1 building and keep it 1 story instead of 2.
Now, is there a basement to it?
No basement. This will be slab
So
on
it says 1 story.
Yep.
Of 10,000 square feet. So that was my question. It's less square footage if you compare it, yeah.
And it's also 1 story. When we were hearing from the residents, some of the concern, now naturally at a 1 story, what we've heard, they still could go 35 feet as in 1 story. So what is the proposed on the building? What is the height?
They were showing their concept elevations at 25 to 28 feet.
And if you want to guide me on that, happy to follow council's guidance.
If we do a legislative development agreement, we can put in terms, because we'll have the background of, you'll follow the PO zone, except, and then we'll have certain things that are listed out. That'll give them entitlements to do this, but we can also put in other things if we want to, We know PO zone says 35 maximum height. Because you're doing 1 story, we want you limited to 28 feet. Something like that. That works for them, that lets them still build, but also keeps it restricted even moving forward for future development. Say it gets redeveloped or converted to something else. they'd still be beholden to that same development agreement.
Now, this learning center, or the experience, how many locations do they have throughout the United States?
I should know that.
Are they publicly traded?
Yes. Well, we do it for 2 groups, so I'm mixing them up. I believe the learning experience is publicly traded, and I want to say they're north of 2,000 stores. If you go to the website, I'm sure that you could clarify that, but they're a large national group.
He's a tenant. He's building a build to suit. The tenant, will come in if they're successful. They'll stay. He could sell. We might not keep the owner. I mean, he could sell this. Construct it and sell it. The learning center could be acquired by someone else. But it's the concept. I think is what we're looking at.
Right. But I think it's an ideal place for daycare.
Me too.
I do
in
too.
that
It's needed.
people leaving for work and things, especially going to Salt Lake. I guess there's some things I really like about it. There's a couple kind of things that I would like to see, though. The issues that we have with the neighborhood here, and you get into Country Estates and all these others, they're pretty high-class areas. So they want these commercial buildings to look residential, so it doesn't detract from their neighborhoods. So what you can do to make this building look nice and keep it from being 35 feet, I could support this. I think it's a good concept. I mean, this zone has been nothing but problems in the past. And I think, I like this. I could support this. But I'd sure like it to look fairly residential if possible. So your design's not bad, but it looks kind of halfway between an office and a church. And maybe make it look a little more residential, and I think it'll fit in. You'll have less complaints from the neighborhood.
Some dormers on the roof, I think, would help with the look.
Dormers. Got it.
Just that residential feel, and I don't know how to get there, but I know it when I see it.
One of the things, Ron, you brought it up, is let's assume they're coming off Highland Boulevard, and it starts to get backed up a little bit. I know you'd like to always have the entrance as close as you can to this, but if we push the entrance to the parking a little bit further by the storage, it allows a little more queuing in just in case there's some traffic issues.
We thought the same, and we're open to, usually engineers make me align it across the street, but if as you can tell, I can punch in anywhere up there.
What they're saying, if you look at the other parking lot on the other side, they're trying to line up that parking lot on the other side. So we have to say, is that important to have those two pulling, or would we rather have it pulled back?
Why is it important to line it with the other parking lot?
So people are facing each other when they're coming in.
Left-hand turns, you can have 2 left-hand turns at the same time. Otherwise, they'll conflict. But yeah, this doesn't seem like a busy road, so.
It's not a real busy area, that's what I'm saying.
I just keep looking at Chris warily that the engineer's going to bite my head off. But yeah.
I'm just saying, if we're worrying about the queuing, because that is what we see at Mountainville Academy. You go up in the Alpine, they just back up all of the street. You can't get up in that area. And I'm not sure it's going to be there, but we also don't know that user. And how things change over time. So.
I'm also a little bit concerned about traffic on Highland Boulevard itself, making that turn as we add a bunch of homes further north on Highland Boulevard, north on Highland Boulevard. Well, not as we do it, but
we don't.
As a bunch of homes are added north on Highland Boulevard, that increases the traffic, and you don't have to have all that many people lined up for a left turn before you're impinging on the. That having been said, that's certainly something that can be considered in the design, and I'm in favor of this moving forward.
Me too.
Me too. I think it's great moving forward. I like having this service for Highland residents. I think it's something we need. I would just say when you bring it back, the things that we'll look at is, like Councilmember Smith said, the residential look and feel, the traffic flow and the parking. And I would say we would probably also want to know when you come back how many people will be working there. And so we'll be utilizing those parking spots regularly. Anyway, I just think those are things that would minimize concern later.
Right. And really traffic flow, we just need to understand, because what's back there is storage units, and the traffic's not terrible there most of the time.
They are going to come in on Saturday. You'll have some things, but yeah.
And you will be finishing the median in Highland Boulevard?
That is Patterson's supposed to be doing that.
I believe we have discussed that with Patterson's, and Rob has made us aware of that. There's a small area that I believe landscaping needs to be completed as well. So
yes, I mentioned that too, that we would want the medians they're installed, but finishing up the
But
landscape.
not just the distance to the property end. I'd like to see it all the way down that road. But I don't know if we can do that.
In that section.
In that section,
In
yes.
that one section.
It's something I've mentioned between Patterson and them to figure out to get it installed. So we don't
I
keep
would
having
hope
it
that we
not
could
done.
do that. To me, that's important.
I'll go to bat, see what I can do, Ron.
So you guys would rather have a daycare here than pickleball courts. I'm just trying to. Indoor pickleball.
Was that an option?
No, short of vision, no. No, it sounds like you got a favorable approval.
Thank
or
you.
A favorable nod to move forward.
Yeah.
And we need to see the details.
Just for clarity, I do believe one of the most critical considerations will be the traffic flow.
Okay.
And if you could move that entrance even further north, even with the upper rather than the lower, the south end, it seems like you'd have a little more of a queue area for people that have to turn in there.
Yeah, both internally and externally.
It just needs to be a major consideration that you've looked at all the options and you have the one that gives us the least amount of impact flow-wise.
Very good discussion. So thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
now move on to item number 4B, which is a Dry Creek lift station property and generator purchase.
So as we were going through at our budget retreat earlier in this year, we actually brought this project forward to the city council because it's something that's in our capital improvement plan. Unbeknownst to me at the time, we actually had already included this as a budget item in this year's current budget. So when we brought it to council at the retreat, it didn't really seem to score very well, but now the thought is if it's something that has already actually been budgeted, should we reconsider that opinion? So we've got $250,000 roughly that was budgeted for this project. The current lift station does not have a generator. It's the only lift station we have on our system that does not have a generator. It does have a natural gas powered motor. The motor itself can only power one of the pumps. We have 2 pumps on that site, so only having that one motor kind of reduces the capacity that we have for that lift station and takes out some of the ability to have redundancy on the system. So that's kind of a concern. It also gets really hot in that building when that motor is running, which is kind of a concern. And obviously, if we are without power, we do not have SCADA, so it relies on a battery to help it recognize when it needs to turn on and off. So I think overall, we feel like there's more backup possibilities if we have an actual generator on site. We did get a cost for a generator. Too far. It's probably about $150,000 installed to buy, purchase, and install a generator. We would need additional property if we were to do that. We've kind of identified an extra 800 square feet where we could place it. Currently, the property that the lift station sits on is on an easement. I think at the time, part of the thought was we should try to purchase that easement so we have the property outright, with the thought being that this is a fairly major investment on the part of the city and we may want to own the property outright rather than just an easement. I think that makes kind of sense. It's kind of unusual to have that kind of infrastructure on property that we don't actually own outright, but we just have an easement for. But I'm willing to take directions from the council as to what they would prefer. There is an existing conservation easement on this area. We've already, I guess, violated that conservation easement because we have a building already right there. But the homeowner or whoever, I think it may have been a previous homeowner, has already done a lot of landscaping in that area. So as far as existing natural vegetation that had been there previously, it's all been pretty much removed. There's grass there now. Right immediately in this 800 square feet that we're talking about, there are a few trees that we would likely have to cut down in order to put the generator there. You can kind of see there's one tree there that's just outside of the easement, just to the north. That's a nice looking tree. We could probably hide this generator right behind it, just take out those 2 smaller trees and keep the one that's closer to the river, and probably even do some landscaping around to hide it. Another thought we had with staff is that if that was not an option, we could look at getting some property to the west and put the generator on the other side of the building where there is no conservation easement. But if you go out there, there's actually some really tall pine trees in that area. They're probably 20 feet tall. I would much rather put it in this area where we have a conservation easement and not have to remove some of those existing large, just gorgeous looking trees, honestly. So we just wanted to hand that over to the city council and kind of get your thoughts on it.
I have a couple questions. How do you power this generator, and how noisy is it?
We would power it. I think all of our generators are natural gas, so we would connect it to the natural gas. I would say generators can get pretty noisy when they're in operation. Hopefully we'd only need to use it in an emergency situation, but we've got sheds around most of our other ones that can help act as kind of a noise barrier when it is in operation. The location is also fairly far away from the existing home that's to the south. It's probably closer to that other home that's kind of across the cul-de-sac. So it does have some separation from that, but as far as decibel levels, I don't have that information right off, but I will say generators can get pretty loud.
Are you planning to put a shed around it, some kind of a building?
I believe that's what we've done in the past, so I would anticipate that that's what we would do for this.
Coming back to the question, this would be kind of for Rob. We have an easement. We've talked about, we've went and acquired different property, or I look, we have our big water tower up in the Beacon Hills area that's on an easement. I know we've kind of worked out because of some things coming on by that. We had some things over by UCCU. We purchased that property. What's our risk legally if we have an easement versus ownership? As we weigh those, what's the weighing of the difference?
It's a great question, and perhaps I'll give an example of something I heard or dealt with before. City had an easement for a water line that ran through someone's yard, and it was just an easement. Due to some additional needs in a different part of the system, they had to install like a valve to access that water line, which would require running something up and it'd be visible above ground. The question then becomes, can the city do that? Or is that expanding the scope of the easement and the city has to pay the property owner? And then you start getting questions of if the city just does it, thinking like because we usually have really broad language in easements about lines and all pertinent facilities and equipment and all of that. Property owner could still say, no, that doesn't cover exactly what you're doing. It was all supposed to be underground. It really comes up with change of use. Of if we're trying to expand something, the property owner that still has the right as the fee owner of the property to say, whoa, you can't do more than what you've already been doing without paying me more for it, and get either an additional easement or acquire the ground. Easements also, depending on their use, can allow the property owner to actually still use the property. So in this case, the property owner could still, walk across here. They really couldn't get into the shed, but they're entitled to use of the property as long as it doesn't interfere with our use. So sometimes they're just little gray areas. Most of the time, it's the same thing in fee ownership or easement. But there's always little kind of gray areas that comes up when we're doing something new. Like if we say our easement was big enough to have a generator, it'd be a question of whether the easement for a sewer lift station also includes the right to install a generator with it. If we own the property outright, that wouldn't be a question.
So the proposal or discussion here tonight is, would we like to Chris, is it to acquire the property and also to put a generator there? I think the generator is already in the budget, right?
Yeah, the money's already in the budget. So I think the question is, do we want to proceed with that? And then also, would we want to get an easement or purchase outright the property?
I'm in favor of this. I think it's important that we have a backup for this, so we don't have any sewage backup if there's a problem, which we could potentially have without the backup electrical. And as far as the ownership versus the easement concerns me deeply. I mean, we could decide to put a metal shed up, for example, over it, and then decide 5 years from now, oh, that really isn't sufficient enough. They've been damaged. They blow over. Let's put concrete, or let's put cinder block building around it, make it less noisy, etc. Those kinds of things, we wouldn't have the flexibility unless we own it. So I'm in favor of pursuing ownership.
So I have a couple of questions. Who are we buying the property from?
It is Brad and Kimberly Anderson. They're the property owners. Their house is actually south of the creek as it goes through there, so there's quite a bit of separation.
Okay.
In the council packet, I included the plat map. I didn't on the presentation.
Right. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring that. My computer's on the blink. So what can we do? I mean, this is a residential area. I mean, it's obviously important to have this. I agree with that. What can we do, though, to kind of buffer the sound?
If we want to install a shed over it, we could always insulate that shed. It will help with some of that. We could also do some landscaping around it that I think can help build a bit of a noise barrier as well.
So does
If we
the
wanted to
generator, is it just a backup, or does it run all the time?
Oh, it's just a backup. It would just be.
So
if
it's
we
only
lost
going to
power.
occasionally
It's
be on?
only on occasion.
Okay.
But Chris, this is our lift station that everything in Beacon Hills flows down to, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
This is a major lift station.
And if we lose power to the lift station, how long do we have before it becomes a real, that we run out of room in the vault?
We've got capacity on that. If we're only running one pump with the motor that we have, I don't know without kind of looking at the flows how long we have. My guess is we're probably good for 24 hours before I'd be getting too concerned.
Then we bring in our pump truck. That's when you bring in your pump truck and it starts to supplement. That's your emergency.
Yep.
Where things happen.
You do your bypass pumping on it.
Unfortunately, always anything we're talking here costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
What's your estimation on? Well, we know what you're saying. 150 for the generator, 150,000 for the generator. What do you think we're talking complete of trying to acquire property and things that way?
We had budgeted 250,000 with 100,000, expecting to cover the cost of the property over it. I don't know if I honestly, looking at the easement, I didn't find a legal description to see exactly what the area was, so I couldn't put like a unit price to it. So, but where we already have an easement, I would hope that we could get it for a better value than. Usually when you buy an easement, you're looking at about 50% of what the actual property costs would be. So I'm hoping that we can get that for fairly inexpensive. And then the additional 800 feet. Honestly, I think if I was the homeowner, I would rather sell the property than sell an easement. That way I'm not, paying property taxes on property that I really have no use for.
Rest of the council, any input?
Yeah, I'm good with moving forward with this and would prefer the purchase option.
I agree, but I'd sure like to know how much they're going to sell that piece of property for.
I do too. That will be our next step.
I mean, this is Highland where we sell lots for $1 million.
But we sell our open space for 4.
Yeah, that's where I was going to start at what we offer for our open space and see where that goes.
Don't stand too close to them when you make that offer.
This is a property acquisition. We'll talk about that then. Okay. Any other input from any other council like to give? Okay. You have the direction. I think that we seem favorable on acquiring the property.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay. Let's now move on to now that we're going to be moving off of discussion items going into communication items. Our first communication item is number 5A, which is a baseball field rental follow-up, and that will be from Jay, and I'm sure Kim might jump in here.
Yeah, I'm working with Councilmember Odella and a gentleman by the name of Derek Reichert, who's a Highland resident and American Fork City Parks employee, to develop a field use and rental policy for our new baseball fields and batting cages. So he's offered to share his insight as someone who works on this day in and day out, and we're grateful for his expertise. We'll be meeting with him a week from today.
Any input, Kim?
We're just meeting with Derek a week from today, and basically, because we have a new base cages rental, so we need to add that to our fees as well. And also probably this is a larger, nicer field, so just see what other cities are doing in order to rent it out.
Have we heard when Christopherson's wanted to do the first pitch here yet?
Oh yeah, what was that new?
When she asked us to delay it, she asked me to give her a couple of weeks and then reach back out to her to get it on her schedule. So I planned on doing that in a couple of weeks.
And Wes, if you're interested in talking with me, I'd like to hear more of what you were talking about during public comment.
I will say what Wes was talking about. So we do have an agreement on Mitchell Hall Field where a team helps maintain it in exchange for reservation time, and it's actually worked out really nice. That field was not maintained whatsoever. Infield was filled with grass, and now I would say it's one of our, other than Mountain Ridge, our nicest baseball field in Highland. Teams have approached Josh about it as well, but he has said he wants to have Highland City maintain it, just because there's a turf area and he wants to make sure that it's maintained correctly. I just think maybe we can give Highland, we can give them a little bit of time to prove that they can maintain it, but if that's not possible, then we could also go with Wes's idea as well.
The other thing, I'd recommend that we look at the Christopherson agreement where they gave the donation for the field, because I can't remember if I'm just trying to come up with memory if they had some usage rights or things that way.
Yeah.
And so we just need to make sure as we're looking at this field rental and how that falls out. Okay, let's move on.
Can I ask a question about that? So, Mr. Warren and Councilwoman Rodella, so you're talking about some sort of lease agreement with the league? Is that what you're talking about? I mean,
no.
How does that restrict what other citizens can do with the field? How restrictive are we going to be on the rentals and different things?
No, so just with Mitchell Hollow, basically a team maintains the field, nail drags it, actually replaces all the bases, weed barrier, does a lot of work on that field. And I don't know how many hours they get a week, but essentially they get a certain number of reservation hours, but there's no restrictions whatsoever. There's other teams that
so
rent
other
it as
teams
well.
can use it,
Absolutely.
but they get a priority number that, hey, if you maintain the field,
Yeah.
you get so many slots.
Yeah.
Okay, and do they have to pay for those slots, or they get that?
That's their
the service is in lieu of paying the fee.
Yeah. And I think it's a pretty good deal. I think the work that they put into the field far exceeds what they would pay to rent it, but it also teaches, a baseball team to take pride and ownership in the field that they play on. And, a lot of other teams, since it is well maintained, do the same as well, hopefully. So that's one thing you can do on that field, on the larger field, but this larger field does have a turf batting area, and so home plate. And so you need to make sure that you have somebody who is maintaining that properly and knows how to maintain it, a baseball field. So I think that's one thing we need to ask ourselves. So far, our baseball fields in Highland have not been maintained properly. Can the city be able to do it? If not, then, there are teams that do know how to maintain baseball fields. So, yeah.
So the compensation for their service is they just get rental slots without having to pay the rent.
Yeah, like 6 hours or something like that a week.
And I think Derek, who's over the American Fork Rec program, that's who they're going to meet with and kind of discuss what American Fork's doing on some of their different fields. They've kind of worked out that was kind of what I think the discussion is.
Yeah, and then there are probably leagues that want to use it as well. So we have to figure out, do we want to open it up to leagues, who to rent it out to? But also the hard thing about this Mountain Ridge baseball field, it is fully enclosed and locked up. And so you can only use it if you have it reserved. So you need to make sure that that reservation system is actually working. And then there's a way to, a code or something like that to get in.
And that's being worked on.
Yeah, so we have come up with a code system that we're with the the building, the maintenance building there. Essentially, there's a code to get in there, and then the key for the baseball field is in that shed. Is kind of our thought process at this point for it. But
So
yes,
would
we're
that
working on
change
it.
with every reservation, or?
So it's like a code that's like you get an individual code based on your reservation kind
Okay.
of a thing. And then it only works to the time that you're supposed to be there using the field.
So the fees that we're going to charge, are we comparing them to what other cities do? This is a lovely baseball field. And it seems like it's a premium baseball field. So are the fees we're going to charge going to be premium?
Yeah,
What
that's
do
what
you
we're going to
think?
meet with Derek about. And so there are actually organizations that have recommended fees as well, he said. So that there's a whole association of field maintenance and baseball field maintenance, and so they have recommended as well. So Derek is the parks guy in American Fork, and he said he'd meet with us. He's a Highland City resident as well to help us figure it out.
Okay. Let's move on to our next communication item, which is item number B, which is an ordinance related to e-bikes. And this is you, Rob.
Yes, so the council asked to get a little more feedback and information on what we currently have regarding e-bike regulations. The primary one is the first code I put up on the screen, which is Municipal Code 10-08010, which says no person shall operate motor or motor-driven cycles or snowmobiles in Highland City parks. Then I put the state code that we reference for what motorcycle and motor-driven cycle means. Potentially include some of these bikes, but also you'll notice it says motor-driven cycle does not include an electric-assisted bicycle. The Surons are of likely the higher class where because they can go faster, they'd fall within this category. We also have rules about you can't drive on or cross parks, trails, open space, any kind of vehicle or motorcycle. Again, under state law, those are a little more specific categories, so that may not include all types of e-bikes. Then we have a general provision that just says if you damage city property, it's a Class C misdemeanor, and we kind of make that very broad. So we have code that can apply to this. We could make it more specific and get more detailed about making sure we're really covering all the different categories or chassis of e-bikes and the various, motor levels, from motorcycle to, people that help you go up the hills. So if the council would like, this is what we currently have, and it's probably sufficient. But we can always get more specific to help our law enforcement officers have something they can really point to, and also be open to the chief's view on any of this as well.
The Forest Service has specific definitions of what's allowed, and it has to do with whether it has pedals, it has to have pedals, and it has no accelerator. If it has an accelerator, it's not allowed in our forest. I don't like that. Mine has an accelerator, so I would prefer to allow mine. But having said that, it's not about me. It's about what, if the Forest Service has that kind of regulation, should we be looking at that and adopting the same type of language?
Can we ask Chief William his opinion? We've got some current laws.
And then Chief, maybe you
Are
can
they
introduce who you
comprehensive?
have by you too also.
Sorry, you guys talked over each other, and I know
Oh.
Stephanie doesn't appreciate that either. So.
Well, we'd like to know who's the officer next to you, and
Oh.
then Scott's asking a question a little bit about this ordinance.
Sure, this is Sergeant Albers. He's actually the on-duty sergeant tonight and is running the officers that are on the shift and making sure that everything's being taken care of. And he's also the top enforcer of e-bikes. So, to answer your question, I do think we probably need to talk about some language that will help us. I think Rob and I can sit down and maybe craft something to help us specifically address the issues that we're having with e-bikes. This last week, last 2 weeks since we last met, we've had some interactions with individuals on e-bikes, and we've learned a few things on the best way to maybe encounter them and have a discussion with them. It's not by chasing them, it's by finding them while they're getting off their bikes, while they're going to the store or in the church parking lots while they're off the bikes, rather than trying to pursue them. But
So tasering doesn't work.
What's that?
The tasering doesn't work.
It's only like a 21-foot. Yeah, you can't get that far. So, and I wouldn't. Yeah, it's not advisable to use a taser for this. But yeah, I do think we need some help with this, and I know Wes isn't going to be happy about it, but we know where Wes lives, so we'll keep a real close eye on him too. So,
So what you're recommending is working with Rob, maybe come up with some language of how you see you might be able to enforce this, because I think what Scott's kind of. We keep hearing we have the issue, but how do we enforce it? We put
Right,
it.
it's an enforcement issue, yeah.
So let me. Do you have anything you want to add? No, okay. We have done some enforcement over the last couple of weeks. I do think there might be some things that could help us make it a bit easier, but that's something not having an in-depth discussion with Rob on this, I think that's something we can just talk about. And maybe what we have will suffice, but our plan this summer is to try and help tamp these down a little bit because this makes our lives easier as it does yours when they know enforcement's occurring. So,
I mean, my question would be, when you look at that bike, I mean, we hear about sirens, and can an officer look and say, okay, this is more of a siren type of bike versus a bike that has an electronic assist or things that way? Is there enough differentiation that you can?
I think simply by looking at the way they're being ridden and the speeds that they're going can give a pretty good idea. And most of them look like, they're shaped more like a motorcycle. There's a different look to them, if you will. I'm actually on my way here. I live in Pleasant Grove, and I was in Pleasant Grove. I followed 3 of them down what is 2100, 2200, or 2800 north in Pleasant Grove, which connects Pleasant Grove to the temple there. And, they were just 30, 35 miles an hour, and they were right in the middle of the lane of traffic. So they weren't moving off to the side or getting out of the way, but...
And they didn't have helmets or any protective gear.
They did have helmets, but if you're traveling at 35 miles an hour, a typical bicycle helmet's not going to help you.
Oh, it was a bicycle
Yeah,
helmet,
they're
not a
bicycle
motorcycle
helmets for the
helmet.
most part. Or the helmets that they wear when they're snowboarding or skiing. That's typically what they're wearing. I did see a few of them yesterday in Lehigh while I was out at Smith's. They'd just come from Sky Ridge, when school got out, and they were wearing full-faced motorcycle helmets. Those kids were, but it just depends.
So,
I mean, the
Chief,
other
are
concern,
we?
we see a lot of I've noticed a lot of younger kids have smaller electronic, almost like motorcycle or electronic bikes. They're smaller and they're riding all over the place on them. They are going pretty fast. I mean, I've been surprised, but okay. So that is something you're recommending, maybe work with Rob and come back with something.
Yeah, if we need to, and as he and I can kind of dig through this, we can discover if we need to add something or maybe it's already there. We just need to take a really close look at it.
Are we concerned about Surons and kind of electronic assisted ones, or where do you see the safety issues?
I see the safety issue honestly with the ones that are being ridden on the public roads and on the sidewalks through the parks. Those the ones that are typically being ridden on the trails, and I always, there's always some one-offs, but typically the ones that are on the trails and on the dirt are the pedal assisted bikes that are less dangerous in my opinion. So,
They're not going 35 miles an hour down the street.
not going 35, but
Any other discussion items on this item? Okay, we'll now move on to number 5C, which is a code amendment for parking of trailers on city streets. That's you, Jay.
No. No parking of trailers.
So this
on city
item
streets.
is just want to let you know we have this coming down the pipe. It's a code compliance issue where people are able to obey the letter of the law, but it's not helping with the spirit of the law. In this case, it's parking large trailers on the street. Development code says you can only park trailers on the street for no more than 24 hours. So people go out every 24 hours and they move it 6 inches one way, and the next 24 hours they move it 6 inches back the other way. It's not addressing the issue, and so Rob and I will be working on changing this so that it's more inconvenient for people who are parking on the streets.
You're saying large trailers, but it's any trailer?
The code specifically says large trailers here.
Because I'm thinking in terms of we did not allow Corey Freeze to put his trailer in his garage on the back of his property because it has to go over our curb to get into that. So he parks it on the street. That's his only option because we took away his other option. We chose not to allow that.
So Corey
does that
doesn't
mean
have
he
a
has to
driveway?
move that off the street, that little pop-up trailer?
Yeah. According to our code, they're only allowed to be there for 48 hours. This is a Brent Wallace thing. So essentially, Brent approached me about this one. It's not just trailers, but it's RVs as well. And so, as a code enforcement officer, I was hoping Brent would be here. He's been having issues where a neighbor said, "Hey, I have a huge RV parked on the street right in front of my house, right next to my house. According to your code, it needs to be moved, can only be there for 48 hours. Well, what is the definition of move? So they just move it 6 inches every 2 days. And so there's a loophole there. And so he has basically said, I can't enforce this code because of the ambiguity of the word move. So trailers, no, they are not allowed on the streets. RVs for longer than 48 hours. But the loophole around it that people use is they essentially just move it an inch. You know, you can move it up and down because there's ambiguity in that word move.
So that's what we're trying to address.
So what are you thinking? Are you thinking that they need to keep it stored on their property and not in the street? Is that if it's past 48 hours or?
Yeah, the intent is to make it so that it has to be moved to a distance such that they consider on-street parking isn't the best way to handle this. Where they put it, that's not for us to say, whether it's on their property or some other storage site. They're welcome to do whatever, but the issue we're addressing is the on-street parking.
You'll define what large is. So that's another ambiguous word.
Our code, I have it up right here, it does not say large, it just says trailer.
Trailer. So it'd be nice to have some definitions.
I think the definition we're looking for is move. I mean, we already have we already know trailers and RVs. It's already in there, but we need to close the loophole that Brent is working with because he's having a hard time enforcing this code to the intent that it's supposed to be. So how do we do that? How do we specify better the word move? I don't know if Rob has any answers. I asked Brent Wallace as well.
I've thought of a few things. It's like Jay said, it's kind of making it, whatever definition we put in there, someone can circumvent it. It's making it so the definition's hard enough that it's annoying enough for them to do it, that both it reduces the impact and they'll probably want to find another way of storing it. So it's like, you have to move to the other side of the street, or you have to move it 100 feet away. Like, it can't remain in the same place. I'm going to look at some other cities and how they handle it.
That's what I'd recommend.
To find something that works for that.
Okay.
Again, whatever code we write, someone can find a way around it. But we're trying to make it so it's like, yeah, you can find a way around it. That's not the best way of handling this. Figure out a way of parking it that works for everyone.
I think if you look at other cities, the funny thing, I remember when one of my children lived in San Diego, every Thursday morning at 7 a.m., everyone had to get out and move their cars. They had a policy that no cars could be on the road. They would drive it around for an hour, and they'd all come back and park again. It was like, it was a policy that everything had to be off the road for that 1 hour. I'm not saying, but if you look at other cities, they're having to deal with similar issues we've had too. So I think
maybe not overnight. Is that a potential? It could be parked there so they can load it up for their trip, et cetera, but it can't be there overnight.
I think I understand the spirit of the law and the letter. I think we have to be a little careful that occasionally you might bring a trailer and you've pulled there. Maybe you need the 40 days. I remember I had vertigo earlier in February, and I drove my truck that had a trailer. Next day I came down with vertigo, and I think I left it there out in front of my house for a week or two because I couldn't drive it. Yeah. And I was going, okay, I could have got someone else. Well, but I could have got someone else to go move it, but there's circumstances we got to be sensitive. Let's go ahead. I think, have you gotten enough? I think we're going to look at some other city things. Let's move on to our next item, which is number 5D, which is a budget direction from the Lone Peak budget change. That will be David Mortensen.
Thank you, Mayor. So almost a week ago, the Lone Peak Public Safety District Board had a meeting and approved a budget. That budget is a change from the tentative budget that was reviewed and approved by the City Council. So we wanted to bring this item as a communication and maybe get some direction on how to proceed with the Highland City budget in relation to this change. The change that was made was adding back in 2 full-time and 1 part-time fire positions into the budget, and then also an animal shelter fee increase. Those two things combined result in an increase in Highland assessment of $141,000. So what we need to figure out is how to cover that. We do currently have a surplus budgeted in the city budget of just under $42,000. Part of that, or that could cover part of the increase. And then we also, in our tentative budget that was approved by the council, have a $250,000 transfer to roads capital for the 10400 North and 6000 West Sidewalk and Crosswalk Phase 1 project. That was a late addition to the tentative budget, and as such is a potential change that could be made to make room for this assessment increase. So we're just looking for some discussion and direction from the council.
Can I just say one thing? I'm on the animal shelter fee increase, and that's kind of from usage, but I sat yesterday and I was talking to the police chief of Pleasant Grove, who sits on the animal shelter board, and apparently Pleasant Grove and Linden are going to fight the fee increase. So the fee increase for Alpine and Highland together is $20,000, so it may not happen.
Do we need to join in with them to fight? Did you see in that?
Well, I was surprised when he said it, but in the final budget, they said Pleasant Grove and Linden, so if they come opposed to it, I guess I could oppose it as well.
Well, is there a reason why they're opposing it?
He didn't go into great detail. He said it was budgetary, and they were having a lot of trouble with their budget as well. So I thought that was an interesting thing. So we meet a week from Thursday. I'll get back to you as soon as, if that goes out of the budget, it may save you $20,000.
And with regard to the, all of the increases from Lone Peak, am I correct in understanding the process that we approve their tentative budget and thereafter we are obligated to pay whatever the assessment is?
Please say yes.
Yes. So the councils, there's a formula in the interlocal agreement governing Lone Peak that basically says if you increase the budget for Lone Peak more than basically the growth of the cities, each council has to approve it. We handle that by approving it through the tentative budget, where we have Lone Peak say, this is what we're going to do. Cities, do you like it? And then once we get to final budget, they're just going to levy the assessment, and Highland has to figure out how to pay for it, and Alpine has to figure out how to pay for it on their end. So short answer is yes. Once the council's approved it, you're bound to pay this assessment. Always subject, of course, if Lone Peak adjusts its budget in some fashion, we could then reflect that into the city's budget as well. So that's always a possibility. Budgets can be amended. We just have to up front, since Lone Peak has approved this, if the council is going to approve it, we have to show, because our revenues, we can't have expenditures that aren't covered by revenues, so we always have to balance that out somewhere in our budget, even if we're going to address it later.
So maybe let me ask it this way. So both cities, so we did a tentative budget. So as a council, we vote yes on the tentative budget. We have as a Highland City Council, we have the approval as well as Alpine's council to approve the tentative budget. Now in this situation, the tentative budget changed when it went to final budget, and the final budget added an extra cost into Highland and for Alpine. But now it's come from tentative to final. I think one of the questions I have, does that final budget, because in the interlocal, I think it says the cities need to approve the tentative, but it's changed from tentative now to final. Does that now need to go back to each of the councils for approval, or because it's only the tentative, it's really final?
It makes sense. So the interlocal does not say the cities approve the tentative budget. It says the cities approve the increase in the budget. Basically, you can't shift this. Lone Peak can't move its budget up beyond the growth of the cities without the consent of the cities. And we're supposed to approve that with the final, it says before the final budget. So I don't think we've really dealt with a situation. Most of the time we do tentative, and then cities do tentative, and then Lone Peak does final, and then cities do final.
And it doesn't change.
And we move it forward except for things cities do just for ourselves. So this one, it's not quite clear how it should work. The city should ratify this change, however, because this is a change beyond what the interlocal calls for the cities to approve this, because it's beyond the growth of the cities.
Is it beyond the city's growth in addition to what we have already approved?
It's not clear.
Okay.
So,
It-
yeah, I guess I'm
You
a
have the
little confused,
interlocal
too.
pulled up, Rob. I meant to ask you, I wanted to have this conversation.
Sorry that I was gone today.
Oh, yes. Hold on. There's a line in here. Okay, I'm just going to read part of it. So, that I wanted to talk to you about. The final annual budget shall be approved by a majority vote of the board. The final annual budget shall constitute the agreed budget for the next fiscal year for the purpose of determining the annual financial participation of the cities. Like, that feels like once the board approves it, that's what we bill the cities at least. It's in paragraph number 5. The first paragraph.
Why he's looking up that the motion which increased from the tentative to the final, the motion also is subject to working out an agreeable interlocal agreement between the two cities. What we understand might happen is you might have the assessment start to accrue in there, but the approval to start expending that assessment has to be worked out between the interlocal agreement is what the motion was. Does everyone understand what we're saying there? Yeah.
So what is the hope about the interlocal agreement, that we'll have less?
Well, we'll have to discuss that. I think as a council, what is our real ask? You know, we've talked about some things about it, but I think Alpine came back and said, so what is Highland really asking? And I think we need to discuss amongst our council, okay, this is what our ask really is, and this is where, you know, there might be two asks. We have this ask, and where are we flexible on that ask?
So adding back in 2 full-time and 1 part-time, that just means that we have 4 here in our station at all times.
It means we now have 9 staffing, but when people go on vacation, which is 70% of the time, you keep it 8 staffing, hopefully for 4 and 4 each station.
Right, but you have 9. So are there times where you have 5 and 4? If
Yes,
you're not on
there'll be
vacation?
times you'll have 5 and 4.
Do we need 5 and 4?
That's probably a good. Well, no, I think based off of call volume, and that is the question. Do we need to have and that's going to be something as a council, and every person will have to, is that the staffing level we need? Are we doing it, okay, are we doing it to try to appease that we have 4 and 4 in each station? Or do we really need that staffing level? That will be part of our request. Is going, do we feel like when we're at 7, we're still operating based off what our call volume is? Or do we feel like we need to make sure each station is at 4 based off of call volume?
Well,
I think the need to have 4 and 4 is itself the need that justifies.
So,
But at this point, we have an increased assessment of $141,083 that we need to fit into our budget.
and what they're suggesting is when we looked at, we had extra money in the budget, we moved to do $250,000 for a road capital improvement at 10,400. Is that where we'd like to have this? Because we need to now balance our budget of $141,000. Is this the area we want to look at?
But we're going to go back on the interlocal and negotiate that.
We are.
Right?
Yeah.
So we may not have to come up with that 41,950.
But it still has to be in the budget.
And I understand that. And for that reason, because I really don't want to give up 10,400. But if we're just doing it to get the process through, I understand.
We don't know because we're going to be in negotiations. Does that make sense? There's going to be negotiations going on. So what happened at the board, there was agreed that we would bring a mediator in. We felt like maybe a mediator to have both cities talk so that, that there's a mediator help us work through it. We do not anticipate that happening until our budget will need to be passed in June. We do not believe that mediation would have taken place by then. And so this will probably be talking with mediators and working through how the assessments, if there's a change or how it works, probably in August, September, maybe as late as October. But we need to be spending the funding and funding the budget as if that approval was there. Correct? Am I stating that correct?
Absolutely. And there's a possibility, say we rework the interlocal and Highland is now paying less, maybe, some of that money could come back, but we don't know that yet. And so our staff's recommendation would be put this project on hold. We all know we really want to do it. I agree it needs to be done, but put this project on hold until we know what our true assessment is for Lone Peak. Chris, in the meantime, has applied or is in the process of applying for Safe Routes grant for that area as well. So, you know, there could be some work done there anyway. It will take a couple years if we do get the grant, though, just because of the timing of it.
I've also sought out some other funding to maybe help us some road capital improvements, you know, that we might be able to look at for some other grants that we've been hearing about that we're also inquiring about.
So,
But coming back tonight, go ahead.
so the 141,000 extra, that pays for 2 full-time fire, 1 part-time, plus not only their salary, but all their benefits.
Correct. It's Highland's portion, the 66% that Highland pays into Lone Peak for fire. That is the 66%, it's the 141,083. Alpine still has to bring their share in also of their.
So clarify for me on the benefits a little bit, because I'm not on the Lone Peak Safety Board. How much of the insurance does the Lone Peak Safety District pay, like health insurance?
100% of the premium.
So I think
What?
for police and fire, it's 100%. For our staff, city staff, it's 95%. So the public safety is 100% covered.
And why is it?
I would assume as we looked at competitiveness out there amongst other police and fire, that was how they were handling it, and so we stayed competitive. Chief, you're in that realm. Is that what we understand out there is what other fire departments or police departments are doing?
The majority of them, yes, not all of them.
So I guess if it's just a question, because, you know, again, I really like public safety. I'm not against it, but it seems like we need to look a little bit at ways for some cost savings. So I'm just wondering, what is the incentive if the district pays for all the insurance costs? What is the incentive to not overuse it? And so the next year it costs us 15% more, and there's no incentive to try to be real competitive. It seems like to me, it just seems like if you're. So I'll give you an example and things. We found with Medicaid, if people didn't have to pay anything for their insurance costs, they overused it. If they had to pay $3 for the office visit, they didn't overuse it. No, that's kind of crazy, I know, and it sounds, but if people have some skin in the game, sometimes there's a little bit of incentive not to overuse things. So I just think we ought to look at that, because in the long run, you know, if we increase another 141,000, and I'm not particularly opposed to that, but at the same time, every year, more and more of the general fund goes to public safety, and at some point, I think we need to start looking at some cost-saving ways, rather than just say, hey, we're going to raise the fee, we're going to raise property taxes to pay
David,
for it.
are you aware on the insurance, I know that they're part of the Highland City insurance pool. We have a deductible. Do the police and fire have that similar deductible?
Yeah, it's the same plan that they're on, that Highland City employees are on. Highland City employees contribute 5% of the total premiums.
So we're paying the full premiums, but individuals are still paying copays or deductibles.
Deductibles, yes.
So there would be co-pays also if it's 100%.
But what percentage? At 5%?
So depending on what type of plan they've elected, if they're a high deductible plan, they're responsible for all of the costs up to their $4,000 individual deductible, just like the Highland City employees. So there is some incentive for them to not overutilize, because if they do, they still have to pay their deductibles and their portion of the costs.
Okay, so the city isn't paying for
We're
all
not
of that.
paying all of their medical costs. We're just paying their premiums for the plan.
But, you know, I think we brought this up in another meeting. One of our concerns is, since we are tied, Highland City employees are tied to the Lone Peak public safety employees, was one raising the rates over the other. You know what, your question, hey, if someone's overutilizing it, is it lifting Highlands rates? Because to be very transparent, Alpine City wasn't seeing the same increase that we were in their health insurance. But it appears, as we've looked, that Highland is adding family members having births as well as Lone Peak Public Safety. Alpine does not seem to be having, where some of those expenses where their staff is having children. That was
Right.
what we looked last year. It seemed that might be a little
Well,
bit of
I'm never opposed to people having children, but I just think it's maybe kind of directing from emergency room visits to maybe urgent care or something. Just looking for ways to kind of cut the cost there, because your health insurance is one of your biggest benefits.
It is.
And you just have to keep looking at ways to,
Good input.
yeah.
If Highland is seeing an increase in births and Alpine isn't, could we start advertising as the romance capital of Lone Peak Public Safety District?
Well, we're the safest city. Maybe we better go see. I don't think we're the most attractive. But okay, let me just come back to this issue here. Is there what the recommendation is? Maybe to look at the $250,000 road project on 10-400. Is that we would then take that $141,000 out of there until we get better clarity? Is everyone agreeable to that?
Take 100,000 out.
140.
And the 41,083 or slightly more of it would come out of the budgeted surplus.
Is that what the council would like to do? So you're almost kind of zeroing our budget surplus, so we'd maybe show $500 surplus, and then is that what you're saying?
Unless we have more property tax and sales tax than we've budgeted, which sometimes happens, like every year.
Yeah, before final budget, we will have updated property tax numbers from the county. So if they are higher than what we've put in the budget, then that will help as well.
Will we have that before the final?
Yes.
So is the council
about a week before?
That's great.
Okay, is the council agreeable then to have only 100,000 come out of the capital of the 10-400, and then the rest to come out of the surplus? Is that
Yes.
the direction the council would like to go?
Yes.
Well, not surplus, there's actually net revenue already there. So not prior year surplus, just current year.
I'm sorry, not surplus, the net revenue that we're forecasting. Okay, I think you've got the direction there. Okay, let's move on to our next one is number 5E, which is the Hanover Way sewer repair. Chris.
So recently, city staff became aware that there's a sewer line on Hanover Way. It looks like we might have an extra N in there that has a belly or a low spot in it, so it doesn't drain properly by gravity. After investigating, it appears that that's the result of infiltration that's taken place. There's a crossing right there where there's a 30-inch culvert that goes over. There's an aerial view of it. You can kind of see in red. That's the 30-inch culvert, and there's a grain line on Hanover Way. That's the 8-inch sewer line. So that's settled. It looks like because of water coming out of the culvert, it's just kind of eroded away and gotten into the trench for the pipe. So we have been out. We've videoed the sewer line. We videoed the culvert. We think the solution is that we'll have to replace about 40 feet of sewer line and another 40 feet of the 30-inch concrete culvert. Just remove it and replace it. We're also thinking that we'll probably try to sleeve the sewer line with a casing so that we don't have that kind of a failure in the future. Estimates for that cost is probably between $75,000 to $100,000. We do have our storm drain fund that does have a balance right now that we can probably take that out of. So we'll probably look at that GL. We're trying to get some documents together so we can actually get some costs from contractors. But we just wanted to make the council aware that's a fairly big ticket item. That's kind of an emergency situation. We obviously would like to get it taken care of as quickly as we can. When the sewer doesn't flow properly, it sits there, it starts to become stagnant, and it can be an issue.
Is the 30-inch culvert ours?
It's ours.
That's ours.
It's
So you're going to repair that?
We're going to repair that.
And
We did, because we just completed our sewer lining project, so we got a price from them, what it would cost for them to line that 30-inch culvert. Their cost just to line that 30-inch culvert is $118,000. I think because we need to get into the road and actually dig up the sewer line, it's going to be a lot less expensive for us just to replace it, the culvert, rather than trying to line it. If we weren't already going and digging up in the road, then maybe we could consider that. But I think that's our cheapest option.
Did I correctly understand that you were wanting to sleeve the sewer line to prevent issues like this in the future?
Yeah. A lot of times, and honestly, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea where we have a crossing like this on a major storm conveyance line to actually install a steel casing that the sewer line is sleeved through. Usually when you do that, like on state highways, you'll install the you'll actually bore a steel line and then just thread the gravity pipe through it, or the water line, or whatever you're sleeving through it. This will be kind of a unique situation. I'm not sure exactly how we'll do it, because we won't have the ability, unless we dig a really big bore pit, to actually place the line and thread the sewer pipe through. I think we'll probably have to kind of assemble it on the ground, or and then set it down into the trench. So it'll be kind of a unique experience if we do that. But I do think that way, even if there's additional settlement that happens in the future, we won't see the settlement happening in the trench and the sewer line, and it should stay positive gravity flowing.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we'll now move on to our next one, which is item number 5F, which is the Central Utah Water Conservancy Recharge Basin. Chris, I understand you had a meeting with them.
Yeah, we met with them earlier this week and just asked what their plans were for that recharge basin. They are going to start drilling 3 monitoring wells. You can see on the map there, one of them is going to be in the northeast corner of the property that they own. They'll have another one that will be on the southwest corner that will be fairly close to some of the homes there. And then they have another one where they bought some property from UDOT that's right off of Temp Highway and 4800 West. If you can see that red dot right there. So they'll be drilling those 3 monitoring wells kind of throughout the summer. And then starting in October, they'll begin a pilot program to just see how much water they can actually get to percolate into the ground. And they'll do that through the winter, and then they'll probably come back in the spring and make more long-term decisions on what they want to see through there. You can kind of see they've got Area A, that's probably the larger of the 2 halves of property. They used ARPA funds to purchase that property from the county, and they have to use that specifically for water-related projects. They can't use it for anything else. One of the questions I had to them is, if they end up needing a smaller footprint than what they have, would they ever consider selling that or trying to develop it, or things that might impact us as a city? I wanted to understand maybe what their long-term plans were. They cannot do that, not unless they repay the loan, the grant that they got for that. So that's not an option with that part of the property that they own. It could conceivably be with the parcel P that they've showed down in the southeast corner. They did suggest, I think there's been discussions in the past, Highland owns that middle piece there. We've talked about swapping some property. I think that's something that might benefit Highland as a city to have a bit of a property swap. Yep, right there. We've had discussions in the past of trying to take the road, the existing road, and maybe bringing it back behind out to the highway. That way it could probably be a little bit flatter than what it is right now. We might actually be able to get school buses up into that neighborhood that can't go into there now. And it would kind of join the 2 public work properties that, so we're not kind of bifurcated right in the middle between the 2, and create more of a secure site for us.
Very expensive.
It's a gravel pit.
No. The road going up in the viewpoint, changing it, very expensive.
It would be very expensive. And I guess some of the discussions that have happened in the past is, if we get enough property, though, we could look at selling some of that property for lots, and so that we could actually use that as a revenue source to pay for a road.
So as we look at this, did you discuss with them about Kilgore's plans there in the gravel pit?
Yeah, so let's clear that out. So the existing mining operations have a lease through 2028. They think that they will be mined out in the next year or 2, though. They don't see it going on that long. It really depends on how much they're producing, though.
We have heard that for the last 2 years.
It's been 5 years. For
Only another year or 2.
years.
Just another year or 2.
Central Utah could buy out the lease if they desire. Depending on what happens with their pilot program, they may decide that they're ready to go more full bore into their recharge plan, and they may benefit them to buy them out at that point. After the mining operations have ceased, Kilgore will be required to revegetate the area with native plants. It didn't sound like a very aggressive revegetation plan. It probably will look like weeds, and would be nice if it looked better.
They also have to bring it to a certain slope, I remember.
Yeah,
It looks like
yeah.
they're going to have to bring a lot of fill in to achieve that slope.
I don't know what the slope is. It's awfully steep right now. I kind of got the impression that was allowable, but that seems way too steep for it to be long.
Well, I look at the slope now, and I look at what plans I saw earlier of what that slope should end up being, and there's quite a difference.
I think it changed though when they decided to put the water project in. I think that what they were required to do to like build it back up is less now. Could they extend the lease as well, Kilgore?
Not a question that I asked. I didn't get the impression that Central Utah would be interested in extending the lease for my conversation, but I suppose anything like that would be possible.
Can I ask you?
Really, they seem to indicate that Highland would need to agree to different elevations to really allow them to do a whole lot more additional mining. And I'm kind of getting the impression that Highland as a city is not inclined to do so.
Kilgore has approached the city several times about the property we own. We have about 10 acres there. Could they mine that? And naturally, I've always said, hey, if we got really dire financial things, that's where you jump. But I don't know.
Councilwoman Bills had some questions.
I just had one other question on the previous slide about the drilling of the 3 exploratory monitoring wells. So what does that entail?
So it will be, I want to say that they're 6-inch holes. They'll go down about 800 feet. They'll just have a pilot tube basically so that they can insert, I think they're just using air tubes so that they can just monitor the level of the water, the surface, how deep it is to get to water. And they'll monitor that throughout the process so they can see how the recharge actually affects the groundwater in that area, the aquifer that we have, to see how much water levels rise as they continue to recharge into that area.
So that's not some prolonged drilling process that's going to be disruptive or anything?
It shouldn't last for more than a couple weeks for each site. These are some of the smaller well drilling that they'll be doing for that. These are fairly small holes.
And will you send around, I assume, or somebody will send around some kind of notice letting people know what's happening for those?
Yes. Yep, we'll do that.
So now, when they drill well number 1, are they putting water in to see where it gets to well number 2, or are these all just monitoring wells, these 3 wells?
They're just all monitoring. So you can kind of see in the middle, I've drawn a blue square. That's approximately where they'll be doing the recharge. They kind of pointed out that the concept people kind of get is it's a little bit of a pond. It's really more of a ditch that as you run along, the water just kind of starts to dissipate and percolate down to where there's no more water in the ditch. It's nothing as grand as a big pond that has,
And let me ask a couple of questions. As I write up there, so I think the lease for Kilgore, who preceded them, was done in about 2008 or 9, because it happened before I was on the council the first time. And I think there was $1 million that went into the city budget, and the city budget was running out of money, and a lot of things that went on at that time. My concern as I drive up along there is it looks like they're mining awfully close to Viewpoint. And at what point do we have to worry about homes starting to fall into the pit? Because it seems like they're going right up under. Isn't there a limit right there? I mean, who monitors that? And with the vibration with the mining, how does it affect people's foundations? Because basically Viewpoint's built on a bench that's composed of gravel and sand. And, I mean, you're an engineer, so is there any concerns when you drive up there?
Honestly, I haven't had any concerns, but I'm also assuming that they have their slope, what they consider to be a stable slope. That's been part of the geotechnical reports that I would assume that they've generated through all that. I haven't gone through and reviewed any of those. I think that's probably a great idea for me to do and take a look at.
I think because we do need to have someone have eyes, because if we're just relying on the contractor's eyes, it might be wise.
I think the city needs to look at that because I think there's some worrisome things happening.
Listen,
to be honest.
At least look at that engineering and the reports,
knew
the
that.
geotech, to see what they're saying to make sure. I mean, my other concern is also where well number 2 is going. It looks fairly close to homes, and like Councilmember Bills was mentioning, we got to be careful that that does not disrupt. You know, sometimes when they do drill, you almost can get too close and cause issues for those homes there. So
Right. And then I think we need to ask ourselves what we want that area to look like. It'd be nice to have the Central Utah Water Project people, when they talk about this recharging basin, to tell us what it'll look like. Because right now it's an eyesore. And we'd like it to look, you know, it's an entrance into the city. It'd be nice if it looked halfway decent with what Ron was talking about, better slopes and some sort of vegetation and, you know, or can we
now,
put,
and you also brought up Area A, or was purchased with ARPA funds. What encompass all of Area A? Like, what is really Area A?
It's
Is
kind
it
of just that north area. If you see where I've got the text that says recharge, it's kind of everything north of there and west of there, and then it goes down to the west of the property that's owned by Highland.
So Area B was not purchased with ARPA funds? Was that with county funds?
That was with, I think, Central Utah funds.
Okay, so you're saying at future they could decide to develop that, since
That would be their only property that they could do something.
well,
different
that's
with.
the property that's not also, that was all been dug out. I mean, if you really look, that area is the flatter area. It's the other Area A that's a great big gravel pit.
They indicated they would be willing to sell that to Highland City.
Well, and we've talked with them about where our 10 acres is at, because we go a little bit deeper in trying to level, like you've talked about, leveling that out and working through that. So that's something the Area B will be probably a conversation coming up.
Yep. So lastly, I did ask them if they would be okay if we allowed Saurons to ride up there and create some bike routes or paths or something like that. They declined to feel comfortable about the liability that they might incur should that be the case. But again, if we want it, they said they'd be happy to talk to us about purchasing part of
Okay.
Area B if we wanted
That
to
will
do
be
that
something we'll
ourselves.
want to, because it will be reworking our property and maybe purchase something that the council will have to, we'd have to have the funds to do such.
Addressing the Saron deal is, I think we've got to take seriously. Because if we don't give them an option, they're going to do what they're doing now, which is not sustainable over time when it comes to public safety. So giving them an area like this, it just totally makes sense if we can figure out a way to do that.
I agree with Ron.
Do we have any ability at all to dictate what it looks like or give them suggestions? I mean, this is a huge project.
I believe it's already been dictated in the lease that they currently have in place. I haven't seen that lease.
I know they have a lease with the owner, and they also have a lease with the city because we granted them the right to cross the city property, and we've extended that with their mining extensions as well because they can't mine unless they can cross our property. So I know there's some terms about it, but I don't know if they're any more specific than, revegetate it.
Like, I would just be interested to know if we can do anything, because it seems like, we argue over like curb and gutter or whatever, curbing.
In 2028. I think it's the lease with the city specifying they need to be done by 2028 with our easement.
I think we lined up ours because Kilgore took a lease from
Spirino.
Yes, Spirino. So I think when Spirino sold the property, it was subject to this leasehold interest as well. And we aligned both of we extended it, Spirino extended it, but we put it at 2028. But I think, Chris can look at the geo stuff. I'll look at the contracts and we'll get some more information for the council on that.
Yeah, let's look at the contracts because I think we need to really discuss this. I mean, we want it to look good. We want it to be a good recharging, but we want those neighborhoods to be safe.
That'll be a good discussion. We were going to have Central Utah come in. Well, I guess they did come in on the canal, or is that the Deer Creek? No, that was Provo River. I think we were going to have Central Utah.
That was Provo River.
We had talked about them, and that's why giving this information to the council, we thought it might be better if we waited until after they began their pilot program to have them come in and talk to the council. But if you'd like to have them come back sooner than that.
It sounds interest of really understanding prior, I think it's something we want to, as we look in the summer, where it's a little slower, maybe have them come in and explain what's going on. And maybe Rob, then we can also look into agreements. We'll understand about the slope issues and things that way. Aaron, why are you smiling so much?
Because you said the word slower, and I just don't feel like it ever. We always think it's going to be, and it never is, Mayor.
I just see this smirk from Aaron. I'm going, something was said there. That
You were looking the other direction, so you couldn't see the similar smirk on my face.
Doug and I are on the same brainwave here.
Let's move on to our next item. This is an update on the school district. I think a lot of you are aware that we have the new name of Aspen Peaks. That has been what's been approved.
I believe we skipped the community
Oh,
development.
did we? Oh, I'm sorry. Did we? Oh, we went right over G.
We're
community
fine.
development. No, we'll go because we have a lot I think that needs to be discussed there. I'm sorry. I got excited to talk about school district. Okay, we'll go to number G. And is that Jay and Rob?
Not too much.
You're involved with the general plan process, so hopefully you are updated on what's going on with that. We anticipate the next meeting will be June 10th, is what we said, the next in-between council meeting date. So that's what we've got.
Can I just add something into this because we're talking about community development?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. So according to the new state law, and a lot of the stuff in community development isn't coming to the council anymore if they meet zoning. I think as a council member, I still want to know what's happening in the city. For example, I didn't know until 2 weeks ago that there was going to be a veterinary clinic. And you know, we're not allowed to come to the DRC, right, as council members? Because I thought that it was pretty clear that we couldn't come. But I guess the question I have, and I'm just wondering if this is something feasible, because I don't want to add a lot of work, but I'm just kind of thinking at the bottom of the agendas we get, it would be nice to see what developments have been approved through the DRC, and just maybe a little map. For example, if you go up the Alpine Highway, there's this big Hawk Estates, and because people ask me as elected representative, what's going on there? And I thought, I don't know, I'm not on the DRC. So if we could get, like at the end of the agenda, maybe just say, the DRC's approved this development, here's just a little picture of it, it's R140, this is how many lots, just a little information for us, or have a place where we can go look at that, other than having to read all the minutes for the DRC. Does that make sense? Is that feasible?
It is. I actually do have a current projects tab on the city's website that might be a project out of date, but I do try to keep a list of all current projects so you can see it and pull up the current submitted plans. Sometimes it's just a question of, like, the vet clinic is not approved yet. It hasn't gone to planning commission. That's when we'll go to planning commission and council.
Oh, okay.
It's just still on the staff side of we're doing the cycles of giving them red lines and comments. But
yet,
we can give you quick little updates on what's been approved and kind of what's in the pipeline.
Yeah, I'd just like to know that, and it could just be attached to the end of the agenda so we know, because, you know, that may have not come to the plan commission or that, but they've already dug up the street and put in the utilities, and, you know, and the neighbors there didn't know about it, and I had to hear about it and stuff. So it'd be just nice to be in the know, not be a mushroom.
Maybe, and we
anymore.
did talk
have to-
about this, a communication item, when this came up, the state
Yeah.
thing. Maybe we put down DRC, things that were coming through, just so we are familiar with what was going on.
This is things we've approved, just a brief summary, and
yeah, we
Well,
can
and
do
that's
that.
what the purpose of this agenda item was supposed to be ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Is to update you guys.
So yeah, we can definitely do that, and I'll make sure to keep the website up to date on the current projects, and we include a link in the agenda so you can click on it and go find whatever current plat is out there.
And then when we have this community update, maybe just say, hey, during DRC, this is who we, if it's appropriate, you say this is who we've met with or what we've discussed.
we've approved it.
DRC typically doesn't meet with people. It's usually just we're coordinating between our departments of, all right, we have 3 projects pending. Everyone remember your deadline is this week for this one, next week for the next one, and this one for the next one, so we don't miss those deadlines coming through. But happy to keep you updated. We'll figure out a way of making sure you have a little more information about current projects. And speaking of, I did want to give an update. Just as a heads up for Planning Commission, you talked about at the transportation general plan discussion about reclassifying 11200 North from a collector road downgrading it essentially to a local street, and then adding some language about making that we can make those connections where we need to, even if they don't meet city standards. So that's a general plan update that's actually going to be going to the Planning Commission next week and then to the council in June.
But by downgrading it, you give more options for more roads to go into it, where the whole purpose of keeping it the way it was, we have control over speed limits, we have control over the width, we can make it, even though it's a corridor or a collector, whatever we want it to be, but by having a collector or a corridor, it gives restrictions that we want on that street.
That is the reason why we make the classification. The direction staff heard from majority of the planning commission and the council at the transportation general plan discussion was to make that change. And we're looking at actually funding that project or potentially doing it this year. So we thought we'd just get the map updated so we actually can build that road if we wanted to. Of course, welcome to have the discussion. It hasn't been approved. It's just something staff's moving
It'll be
forward
coming
with.
into us, Ron. So
You'll have a chance to, you can come to planning commission as a resident, and then you'll have a chance to review it as the approving body in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Could I take this moment really quick as we talk about some of these projects? We do have our road maintenance project. They will be starting on 6800 West on Tuesday next week. So that's coming up really quickly, and I just wanted to make sure the council is aware of that.
Is it now, and I've asked this, but we are starting to see like in 6400 West and some things you're seeing some, and is that the sewer?
That's TSSD. They've been doing survey work. They are planning on some line size increases through that area. I haven't heard anything about timing for actual construction. I think they're still in the design phase, but we were really concerned on 6800 West what the timing of that road was going to be, because where they're working on the pump station right now on 6000 West, that will require a closure of that road as they reconstruct that intersection through there. We thought, it's probably a good idea to not have both roads closed down at the same time. So they're planning on doing that work in July. So we asked this contractor to be done with 6800 prior to July, and he hopped on. We just had our pre-con with him this morning, and by this afternoon he had it scheduled for next week. So
Yeah, you should have all, if you got your Appify, am I saying the word right? But you should have all received communication that you're starting next week on 68. Okay, we'll now move on to number 5H. I think we've discussed it. No, I mean, what we're seeing with the school district, like how we're going to be having elections coming up, the school district also will be having elections for the new board members, and they'll be moving forward. So we do need to keep abreast of what's going on school district-wise. Hopefully we'll see some good candidates come here city council-wise, but also school district-wise as we run for elections. So if nothing else, we do have just kind of looking our scheduling. We do have tomorrow night, we have a budget residence preview. It's not a budget work session. It's a community open house for
Community budget preview, I think we call it. 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock here tomorrow night. So that is something we will have. We were inviting the community to come in to go through the budget. Occasionally, we'll get some people to come in and ask different things. We'll see what our meeting is tomorrow night. And you said, once again, that's at 6 p.m.?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that, we do have a work session also as well.
Mayor, before we hit work session, do you remember we wanted to have a brief conversation about the fling, if that's okay?
Yes. Let's go ahead and do that.
And just to jump in real quick while we were talking about upcoming things, before our next council meeting, I believe the filing period opens, yes? Or maybe it's the day of.
It's actually right in the middle of that. So our next council meeting will be June 3rd, and candidate filing is the 2nd through the 6th, from 8 to 5 p.m.
Are you planning to, as you've in the past, you've kind of put out on the website of those who filed, kind of as those applications come in, is that the plan still?
Yes, at the end of every day, I try and update the website so we know exactly who's filed for that day.
So June 2nd through the 5th from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.?
So the 2nd through the 6th, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
So they need to be, no matter what, registered by 5 p.m. on the 6th.
Yes, they
And
need
you'll
to
be
be in
there
my
Friday.
doors. I will be here Friday. They need to be in my door no later than, let's not wait till 5 p.m. It'll take a little bit of time for people to fill out the paperwork and go through all the process and make sure I have the chance to explain a few things to them. So I'm hoping that everyone who's listening won't wait until 5 p.m. on Friday. They'll maybe see me on 10 a.m. on Monday morning.
And this time, remember that the financial conflict of interest forms are required for filing. So as we talk to folks who may be interested in running, remind them that that's, you probably don't want to wait until the very last moment, because you may need to go out and get additional information to fill those out.
That is correct. And my plan is, as soon as I have a finalized conflict of interest form, it is going to be on the city's website. I'm planning on putting the entire candidate packet out there, just because there are some things that they may want to fill out ahead of time, especially the conflict of interest. And then if someone chooses to use a name other than their legal given name, there are some stipulations that they would need to work through this time. So ideally, a candidate would call me prior to the candidate filing period, and we could talk through some of those new regulations, which would be wonderful.
Sounds good. Let's go ahead. We also we had a fling meeting this last Thursday. We wanted maybe some direction and purpose of the fling.
Yeah, so the fling, as you gave additional funding to raise the bar on our city events, the fling among those things. And we just wanted to get some direction as we try to improve the quality. Are we trying to do larger events that, to turn the fling into a regional draw, or are we trying to appeal to mainly residents of Highland, and the things that interest them more? Are you understanding my question?
I would think the latter. It's a city celebration.
Yeah. I think that the main feedback I hear from residents is Highland Fling used to be a big community event, and now the community just does not attend. Yeah. So we need to bring things back that the community wants to be a part of and attend, and all age groups, not just certain age groups, but every single age group.
Yeah. And so that, as we try and get more people to come, focusing on Highland residents, we just wanted to make sure we were not making this a bigger thing than what the council intended. And so,
from those who went to the meeting, from what it appears, coming to what Kim mentioned, there used to be a pretty good, I think it was a Friday, Saturday events, and we had good turnout. And I think the city, and I think a lot of cities then start to spread out during the week. Some cities have maybe been successful spreading out the week, but soon when we did that, we kind of weakened out the aspect. And so I know the Fling Committee, as they've been meeting, they've talked about maybe trying to condense it, not having it be a full week event, but maybe something a Thursday, Friday, Saturday event to focus on things.
Peach Days, for example, is 2 days. It's 2. And one of the things that the committee's looking at now is maybe 2.5 days.
The one thing and I've mentioned this to Christina is, if you go back 2 years ago, our car show wasn't was not well attended and didn't have, and yet last year, by getting the right people that were doing it and sponsoring it, it turned out to be a home run. Does that make sense? And so we have to be careful, because like with the car show, what night works for them to come? I don't know. It might also that's a Tuesday, Wednesday versus a Friday. You know what I mean? And so. I've kept asking her to call Lane Downs for the Lanes Down experience. But with that, those who were at the meeting, any input on what came out of that meeting last Thursday? I believe Doug and Ron, you were both there.
Right. There was a potential, as Jay was mentioning, that we do more regional, and I don't think anybody, besides maybe Christina herself, was very excited about that. Her thought was to bring in influencers that then would bring in their following. And it would go to Salt Lake. I don't think that's really what the Fling's about. The Fling's for the Highland residents. I did toy in my mind. I'm going, okay, if we have a bigger event and there's a lot more people, does that make it feel to the residents more successful? Well, only if they're there. So it is for the Highland residents. And the way I look at this, and I'm very serious about it, we had very humbling results from our survey about the Fling. If we do this Fling this year, and we get the same kind of results next year, we failed. That is where we're going to need to measure. How are we doing with the fling? And that's the residents. Those surveys don't go to Pleasant Grove or to Cedar Hills or even Alpine. They're for residents. So I want the residents to feel like the fling is theirs, not a big county fair. That's not really what we're after.
I think that a lot of the ideas that Christina had are really good ones. That you're reaching out to some influencers, really focusing on social media. But we can do that and still focus on Highland. Without, and to some extent, that's a false dichotomy. Because if it's an absolutely wonderful event that everybody in Highland wants to come to, then we're going to have people from neighboring cities coming as well. So I really liked the general approach. I agree with everybody here that focusing on turning it into a regional event is not what we're interested in. But the same approaches that Christina was talking about, I think make perfect sense if we're focusing on Highland.
The other concern was, I heard is the thought to spread it out on Saturday out to multiple parks, or to keep it kind of to one park. Was that kind of discussed and decided?
I don't know that it was decided. That it was discussed, and my understanding was that the general feeling was actually really well summarized by your comments, Aaron, that we were spreading it out too far across there. And who knows, maybe looking down the road, it spreads that far. But for now, keeping it more condensed is a better approach.
The other comment I'd have is the magazine. As I talked a little bit to Christina, I think that someone said, well, we maybe didn't want to do the magazine. David, is the magazine where we get funding, is that a profit center for the city, traditionally for the fling? Is that if you go out and seek the advertisers in the magazine, I know it's, you put the magazine out. I mean, I don't know if a lot of you got the Cedar Hills magazine just this last week.
I did.
It talks about the events. Is that, I've always
I
thought,
would have
based on
to-
that, but I thought it generated some funding too.
I'd have to look into that. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can look into that and get to you.
It's not the magazine itself that generates the funding, but it's the sponsorships, and the sponsorships want to be in the magazines ultimately, right? Because they feel like they've got more of a reach that way.
And my understanding was that there wasn't really a specific discussion about not doing a mailing. It was, should we scale down the size of it and keep it better focused?
I will, and I was not able to attend because I had a prior commitment that night. Something fun, I did see that Cedar Hills, you always look at others, they were doing a drone show before the fireworks. They're going to do a drone show for 15 minutes and then their fireworks. I thought, that's actually cool.
Was their drone show sponsored, did it say?
I just saw it directly going, because it said drone and fireworks, and going, are you going to have the drones and fireworks going off?
It's my understanding it's about the same cost, so you'd be doubling the cost if we do both.
We'd have to look at something. So unless you get a sponsor.
So I just want, I guess I just want to know, do you feel like our new community development person is on the right track of what we need to do in order to fix the fling, or are we going to go down a road that we don't want to go down
I don't
again?
have a simple answer to that. I think it's manageable, and I think Jay's in for a task to manage it, but I think it's manageable. Absolutely. I think, I was telling Aaron, when you've got somebody that you have to put reins on, that's far better than having somebody you have to put a fire under. So I'd much rather work with somebody who really has grand ideas, and you've got to kind of hone it down and focus it. But that's what we're up against right now.
Yeah.
And a real strong personality. So yes, I absolutely believe it's manageable, but it's task specific. It's going to have to be addressed as we work with Christina to make sure she stays focused on really what our, as a council, goals are, which is for the Highland residents.
And you know, I think several of you have had the historical community or society reach out to you. They're saying, hey, this is our 150 years. I think that's been somewhat incorporated when I talked to Christina in, and some things that way. I think there's been a lot of, concerns about what changed. I don't know if it changed bad. I mean, there's some things that weren't going right. I can tell you that as a resident that was here 30 years ago, and everyone would follow the parade down, and you'd all be there on Saturday. I have not noticed that. So there's something we're not hitting right. And so.
I think the main thing I hear from residents is bring it back to how it used to be. I mean, it was a great community event. The kids all would ride their bikes down there. Everyone came to the fling. It was a teenager hangout. Also, all the teens have memories of the big dance at the Highland Fling.
They had a big dance Friday night.
Yeah. So I think I feel like that's the main thing I hear. Something about fish, and I don't know. Wasn't one of your kids over that grabbing fish?
The fish
live
pond.
fish. The fish pond. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, my daughter Sarah did it for many, many, many years. But that's something that and it's that bad. I'll tell you what, if you want to go what's the olden time, they would have a big dance Friday night, and the youth would all be there at Mountain Ridge tennis courts. But Saturday, what it was is they had all the free games. Kids could come down, and there were free games to play, and so it brought the parents. What happens, we moved the kids' games on Wednesday. That's where they thought they moved it off, and then we put in bounce houses and charged $20. I'm just, that's...
That's a good idea.
That was some things that changed on things.
One of the things that was really positive that came out of this was from Suzanne Mann. She really basically had what I would consider a failure last year with like 6 kids.
But she had a good one the year before.
And she had a great one the year before. But last year wasn't so good, so she was getting creative. And her solution, I just was so impressed with, and that is that they're going to do a parade where the kids will put their strollers will be all fancied up, and they'll have a contest. They'll have winners of the contest, and then there'll be a baby crawling contest that Aaron would maybe be interested in. So some really good creative thought came out of the very first meeting, where it was obvious that we can't just keep doing what we've been doing. We've got to figure something different. And Suzanne, in my opinion, came up with the best solution.
And we all remember, we actually used to do a drive-in. There is some reason they moved away from the dances. The kids maybe weren't coming out. The police will probably remember there were some situations from a dance probably 20 years ago that got away with some things there. But like I said, we actually did a drive-in theater, if you remember, and we had I bet we had 100 cars at certain times. I mean, it's it is thinking out of the box and finding things. So I appreciate those who attended on Thursday.
Yeah. Appreciate your input. On the agenda, can I just tell a couple little things that I've learned in the last week, just for the interest of the council. So I'm on the North Point Waste Management Board, and we had a tour of the Bayview landfill, which is the big landfill, which is used by several districts. At this time, there's about 400,000 tons of waste that's put in that landfill. They anticipate it'll be up to 1.6 million as other districts come on. So we went down there, and one of the things is it's probably the least expensive landfill for tipping fees. One of the most interesting things, I thought, I just learned this, and I've been on the board for a while, but they line this landfill with a thick liner so that things don't go into the aquifer and into the, so it's really cool. So that's the first thing they do in these pits. The other thing is the landfill is full of pipes that collects the methane gas. And then they pipe it to this company that refines it and then ships it off. And they says with time there'll be enough methane gas which would power every home in Utah County because it's converted to natural gas. So it's pretty amazing, okay? The other thing, I brought this up in our meeting yesterday morning. I said, so you got all these other districts going to haul their garbage down there. That all goes through not Cedar Hills, but Saratoga Springs. These huge trucks. And I says, isn't this a problem? So they're looking into that because I'm glad it's not coming through Island. So the second thing is I'm being appointed to the Utah County Public Health Board. Thank you, Mike Kennedy. But it's pretty fascinating, and I'll bring things from that because they had a big discussion on mosquito abatement in the county. And of course, the big things, we're too far north for the Zika virus and the Chickamauga virus and that comes from mosquitoes. But there's still West Nile virus in equine and the horse population and things. In fact, one of the county commissioners, and it's on the internet, actually had West Nile virus. And so, yes, in the past. But this mosquito abatement program is very interesting. So one thing that affects the city is that they have public health workers on their bicycles going and treating all the storm drains. And I didn't know that. And they've got new things on it that they won't wash off after the first time. The other thing is they do a lot of this mosquito abatement with drones. So it's really kind of fascinating. They have this really kind of advanced program. So the big thing for the citizens is we just need to encourage them. One is not let there be pools of stagnant water around because they're mosquito breeding areas. And if they have problems, they can make a complaint to the public health department, and they'll come and do some spraying and larva treatment and stuff. So it's kind of a neat program.
Sounds good. Now, we do have a work session tonight, and like I mentioned, we do have a closed session also. And so with that, I'm wondering if we'd like to take maybe a 10-minute break before we go into work session. And if we can kind of get, guys, if we can kind of focus.
Is this a work session or executive session?
Work session, then we have an executive session after.
Oh.
But we need to be done. I'm just saying, we can get through the work session, then let's get into the executive session. 10 minutes, guys. So at 9:05. So tonight, what we're hoping to do is in our work session is actually cover the encroachment and be able to get better information on how to handle. And to be very open, we've been talking about what areas to go to in the city to discuss, like the next area to go to for encroachment. So that's one of the things we also want to discuss tonight is what would be the next area for us to go look at and different things. I know, Jay, you've kind of got some things prepared for us to discuss on that. So if it's okay, during this work session, we'll turn that. We would like to try to keep the concise to the work session. We do have a closed session, and I know everyone's tired because we started at 6. So.
Yeah. Right, I will try to be succinct. I had planned to go over some background on encroachment, but if we can dispense with that. So the process we do is code enforcement, me, public works employees who are out in the field working in open space. We identify areas that are being encroached upon. We review them and say, okay, based on the nature of this encroachment and where it's at, should it be a maintenance agreement that we can offer them? Or is it going to, do they need to restore it to its original state? And so I had a cool little thing here talking about some of the nature of the encroachments that we see. This one's a particular crazy one, but that's for another time. And so we send out letters saying, where we document, you can see we have pictures showing here's the nature of your encroachment. Here's the city's property, and here's what you're doing on it, where you've moved into it. We need you to either enter into a maintenance agreement with us or remove it. And so we give them those two options based on whatever it is, the best course of action that staff recommends. Let's see here, moving on. Just to get to the nitty gritty here. So right now we've been doing Highland Hollows and Canterbury North. Those are winding down. In fact, those who have not chosen to comply by March or May 30th, we will be going in and removing that for them and billing them for it. And that's a discussion for another time as well. So, but our options for the next area of focus is either Windsor Meadows, we have about 10 encroachment issues there, or Beacon Hills, where we have about 35 encroachment issues. Windsor Meadows, this is a shot of what we're looking at, where it's the trail system in this light blue shaded area, and also north right here is where most of them are. You have instances where you've got they've got grass going out into the large oval there, and maybe some trees that they've planted and not us, or they've got what looks like here on the right in the circle, they've got a garden box extending into. Now, in the maintenance agreement, it says that people can have small gardens. Are you okay with having garden boxes? Or is that too much of a structure?
Now, in the maintenance agreement.
Yes, the
That-
maintenance
that's allowed.
agreement provides for gardens
Oh,
to
yeah.
be on city
Sure.
property.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they have a maintenance.
So this is the type of thing we're looking at with Windsor Meadows, a
So
smaller.
Windsor Meadows, what you're saying is mainly garden boxes. Maybe they've kind of landscaped up to the trees, which we've usually
So
done. Some
they've landscaped up to the trail, which we say is permissible if they
Correct.
have a maintenance
Yes.
agreement.
Correct.
And that example didn't have a maintenance agreement. They just did it.
No.
We have not went through and probably done a lot of maintenance agreements in Windsor.
Okay.
So this is the nature of the encroachment in Windsor Meadows. Nothing too egregious, I would say. Our other option is Beacon Hills.
That's a problem.
So this one is a little more problematic, and I wish I could zoom in and make this a little bit bigger. But you can see several ovals there along the hollows there where people have gone in and put in anything from trampolines to fire pits. It runs the whole gamut of the A through J that we had in the maintenance agreement, stating these things are all not okay. And you'll notice it's kind of interesting because on this is I had to rotate this to fit it on the slide and get a bigger resolution. But you can see on the top side, which is facing east, in reality, you've got someone started doing it, and then everybody moved down the line and started doing it as well. Whereas on that other side, it's really not a problem. And so we are hoping that if we can enforce, one person and get them to clean up, that we'll have voluntary compliance by everybody. That large circle there, if you zoomed in, you'd see that they actually we have a trail going through there, and they wiped out the trail, the trees, everything. So we're working on trying to get that one fixed. But
Now, on our enforcement, then, we go back to restoring that.
yes,
We
in cases
require
like
that.
in cases like this where you're looking at with Beacon Hills, it's not along a trailway that we want to keep. The ones that are more urban, I guess you could say, that we looked at, like in Highland Hollows or Canterbury North, where it's corridors that aren't along a wildland. Where you have a hollows here, we do want this to stay in a more native, natural state. That is our intent. A lot of people say, well, it's just weeds. We're only, uprooting weeds and planting over weeds. And I said, well, be that as it may, that is actually our intent, is to keep it that way. A lot of times when people start putting their fire pits right up against the trail, people start to feel like they can't use that trail anymore because it's someone's yard now. And so that's something that we're trying not to do. Mayor, you said earlier, we don't even want curbing because it makes it look like there's some ownership there. And so in the hollows, we really would be going more with restoration plans and not with maintenance agreements. Because
when you say hollows, you're talking about Beacon Hills.
Beacon Hills,
Talking
I'm sorry.
Highland Hollows.
Along the hollows here.
The Highland Hollows down 10400. This is now Beacon Hills. Now, let me we had a concern here, and you can see up here in that eastern area where you have all the little different pie shapes. We had a property owner, and we'll just say this was Scott Smith, we entered into, and then he's encroached again. Has that not been restored yet?
I have not verified it. I remember his
property is that one with the big circle.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
prosecuted him, and I remember hearing that Josh
other Scott Smith
met with his attorney on site. Not this Scott Smith.
Yeah.
Other
I
Scott
thought that
Smith.
was
I didn't even want to say the name, but it came out. So.
I remember Josh met with their attorney on site to figure out how to. I don't remember following up after that. I think that was last year at some point.
Yeah, I think these things need to just not take as long, because then there isn't incentive to actually do anything. They kind of are calling our bluff. As long as you don't do anything, I'm not going to do anything. So I feel like, once we say you need to restore it, it needs to be.
So council, if we have all these residents in the small round circles come and say, hey, this is property that is behind there, why does the city need it? Why don't you sell it to me? Why can't I use it? It's useless property. Are you guys okay to enforce? Now, this is not a conservative easement right here, right? This is not a conservation easement here in this area?
I thought it was
that
with
I
all those
know
trees.
of, but it is just land of the city. I'll let Chris speak.
But that
to if he
heavily
has
wooded area is
anything.
usually comfortable.
Yeah, I honestly was kind of think it is a conservation easement.
It is a
but-
con.
So with that, council, we will be sending notices if we choose the Beacon Hills to all these who are circled to ask them to comply to remove off as that, and if not, then we start getting more and more serious. So
I'm ready to take it seriously.
Yeah. And that I personally would my recommendation would be Beacon Hills because it is more egregious. There's more of them. And so with council's mandate, I am ready to go.
Let's do it
on this.
And we've got to follow up with Scott Smith.
Rest of the council, where you at?
I agree that Beacon Hills is the one to start with for exactly the same reasons that you suggested, Jay.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, you got all five, and the mayor agrees.
Okay.
All of us are saying, let's go tackle Beacon Hills.
Okay. We'll draft letters and get those sent out as soon as we can. They have a year to get into compliance.
As long as they kind of enter into an agreement that they'll be doing such.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see some of these encroachments. Is some of them just where they planted grass?
Some of them are grass, but others are where they have pushed out their landscaping beds. There is a
Fire pits.
There's a fire pit there. There's a whole jungle gym that someone's put out there.
Isn't the pirate ship in Beacon Hills?
I think it's
it's
a little bit. It's down toward. It's not in Bull River, but it's just north of Bull River a little bit. But yeah, that'll be a great one. Hand over the pirate ship or tear it down. Turn it into a city park or so.
So be it.
Okay. Well, I have my marching orders, so we can conclude this if there's no more. Like I said,
nothing else, then
wanted to keep it succinct.
Anything else we need to do before we make a motion to go to closed session?
One question about you talked about encroachment, including fire pits. Do we know if those are close enough to the native vegetation that we have some concerns, safety concerns in that regard? Is there any way we can do something faster than a year in that particular case?
I mean, they're usually, they have a good amount of sod and things around them, but yeah, I mean, I would be happy to have a conversation with the fire chief or fire marshal about that. And
I would be inclined to go with you can't use it starting immediately, and you have a year to get rid of it.
Your fire pit on our property.
Yes,
you have to stop using it.
Well, it's a risk.
And then
it's a liability.
get around to removing it.
And it's a fire hazard. I mean, now they're going to come and say, hey, the grass so close to my yard is a fire hazard to me, and you need to cut it. They're going to come back the other way.
And they will.
Yeah, they have, and they will. Yeah.
So here we have our future meetings. Here is there. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to go ahead and adjourn into closed session. If we can have a motion, please.
I'll make that motion. I move that the Highland City Council recess the regular City Council meeting to convene in a closed meeting in the executive conference room to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, impending or reasonably imminent litigation as provided by Utah Code, annotated 52-4-205.
Have a motion by Scott.
Second.
Second by Brittany. I think we do roll call to go on this, so we'll just start down here with you, Brittany.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Doug? Kim?
Yes.
And Ron?
Yes.
We are now in closed session, so if we can just meet back there, we've already had our